Say again, please, Heather.
We're ready if you are.
All right. Would you swear the witness, please, ma'am?
Yes. Good afternoon, Dr. Thourani. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. First of all, will counsel please introduce yourselves and state any objection to the witness being sworn in remotely?
James Potts, here on behalf of the plaintiff.
Heather McGrady on behalf of the WellStar defendants, no objection.
Paul Reynolds on behalf of. Sorry, go ahead. Paul Reynolds on behalf of Dr. Klass, no objection.
Vinod H. Thourani, MD, no objection.
Who else is present on the call?
Leon Melbourne, WellStar corporate representative.
All right. Anyone else?
I see a JHP the second on here. I don't know if that's another
Oh,
participant.
yeah. That's Elizabeth Crocker.
Okay.
Would you swear the witness, please,
Yes.
ma'am?
Good afternoon, Dr. Thourani. If you could raise your right hand for me, please. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may lower your hand.
Tell us your full name, please.
Vinod Harichan Thourani.
Can you spell that, please?
Yeah, V is in Victor, I is in Indiana, N is in Nancy, O is in Oscar, D is in David, and then my middle name is H as in Harry, A-R-I-C-H-A-N as in Nancy, D as in David, and then my last name is Thourani, T is in Tom, H-O-U-R-A, N is in Nancy, I is in Indiana.
And where do you live? And where are you privileged?
Piedmont Atlanta Hospital, Piedmont Athens Hospital, and I believe Piedmont Macon Hospital, even though I don't primarily work at any of those other two programs, hospitals.
All right. Do you have credentials at any WellStar
No, I do not.
facility?
I do not.
And you're a cardiothoracic surgeon?
I am.
You're board certified by the American College of Surgery?
I'm board certified by the American Board of Thoracic Surgery.
Yes, sir. And are you also a member of the American College of Surgeons?
I was in the past. I let it relinquish.
Okay. Do you know about when that was?
I don't.
All right. And you're not a hematologist?
I am not a hematologist.
Right. And your primary focus as a cardiothoracic surgeon is your patient surgical outcomes?
Objective form, you can answer.
I'm not sure I understood that question, actually.
That's fine. What part didn't you understand? Surgical outcomes or patients?
Well, I think they're all related. Surgical outcomes are paid. Patients have surgical outcomes.
Right.
That's
You
what I'm
agree
stuck
that that's your primary focus, your patients' surgical outcomes as a cardiothoracic surgeon?
Yeah, so I have, under my preview, I actually have 14 heart surgeons. And those 14 heart surgeons, as the chair of cardiovascular surgery at Piedmont, I oversee the outcomes of all 14 surgeons. So it's not just mine, it's the healthcare systems cardiac surgeons across 4 different locations.
You agree that in contrast, a hematologist is uniquely qualified to diagnose and treat thrombolytic complications?
Hematologists amongst a lot of different people, hematologist is not the only person who is able to treat or diagnose patients with thromboembolic events.
Yes, sir. And my question didn't have anything remotely akin to only in it. Could you read back my question, please, Madam Court Reporter?
Okay, give me just a moment. I'm working with 2 different systems here, so it may take me a minute.
Take your time. And
this is just the unedited version. I had that you agree in contrast that the hematologist is uniquely qualified to diagnose and treat thrombolytic complications.
Search form.
I'm not a hematologist, so I mean, maybe that's the wrong question for a surgeon.
So you can't answer the question?
A hematologist, I mean, treats blood-borne diseases. So
Do you ever call on a hematologist for a consult?
I do sometimes require hematologist for a consultation.
And you do that because you want to first ensure the safety of your patients, right?
Sometimes, not always. I mean, the safety of the patient is paramount, but we do that because sometimes we, if there's a controversial thing that we believe a hematologist will provide us additional benefit, then we do consult them.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's for the benefit of your patient, right?
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit. Say that again.
Would you read the question back, please, Madam Court Reporter?
And just give me a moment.
Sure.
And ultimately, it's for the benefit of your patient, right?
It would be a benefit for, yeah, the patient.
And you're not a pathologist, right?
I'm not a pathologist.
No training in hematology, right?
In medical school and residency, yes. But besides that, no.
And that was in the, what, mid-90s?
90 to 94 was my medical school.
Okay.
The residency was 94 to 2005.
94 to 2024 is what, 30 years? Is that right?
1990, yeah.
And you never performed an autopsy?
I personally never performed an autopsy.
Right. You've never made a determination about a patient's cause of death?
I haven't personally performed an autopsy. I've been there for an autopsy, but it wasn't performed by me. It's routinely performed by pathologists. So the cause of death, I have determined many times over the last 19 years in my career.
As an expert witness?
For my own patient. Are you talking about my patients or are you talking about me as an expert witness?
The question was as an expert witness. That's the question.
Oh, as an expert witness, I have never performed an autopsy.
The question was whether as an expert witness, you've ever made a determination about the cause of a patient's death.
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you reviewed any documents before your deposition here today?
I have.
Tell me everything you've reviewed.
I moved over there. I'm gonna bring my phone back. I left my phone when I was trying to get closer to you. So I'm gonna get up and just grab my phone. So the reason I'm grabbing my phone is just because I took a screenshot of all the paper or the documents I've reviewed. So I'll looking at my phone here for that document. I looked at the deposition. It's called Depot. I'm reading out the PDF of what was sent to me. Depot Ahmad Topi dash full parentheses 591651.1 in parentheses. Depot Caroline Stone, same dash in full number. Depot David Yugand, MD Mini, Depot Deline Huff, Depot Elizabeth Brayton, Depot Jeffrey Michelson, Depot Jesse Blakemore, Depot Kathleene Saunier, Depot Ken Knowles, Depot Megan Makuchin, Depot Richard Myung, Depot Solomon Mignori, Depot Sonia Camphor, Depot Stephanie Bright. And then there's the NOD, Dr. Thourani. There is the S. McKee deposition. There's the Saunier versus WellStar complaint, and then the WellStar Henderson Hospital abridged document. There you go.
Yes, sir. You weren't provided with Dr. Klass's deposition?
I do not see that, no.
Any idea why you were not provided with that deposition?
Do not know.
Okay. And have you also reviewed the medical records?
Yes, that's the WellStar Kinnison abridged, massive PDF for the medical records.
Okay, my understanding of the meaning of the word abridged is it's less than all, right?
Just reading out the file that was sent.
Yes, sir. How many pages is the abridged medical record?
I don't have that in front of me. But if I remember correctly, it's 634 patients that's what I have written on my notes that I have that was sent to you. And so but I don't have that document in front of me now.
The notes that you sent, you sent the notes today, or they were sent by counsel at 3:55 today. When did you send them to your lawyer?
I think 350, maybe.
What's that?
Something like that.
Oh, 10-4. Would you go ahead and upload the medical record that you reviewed to the chat and share that with everyone?
Don't know how to do that. We're
make
not on a laptop. We're not on a laptop. We're on a screen here, which doesn't have access for me to do that.
Can you do it from your phone? Can you email it to that machine or text it to the machine in front of you?
No, this machine doesn't have the capability to do that. It just has a bunch of buttons that allow us to turn the TV on.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I can't. There's no way for me to get emails here. There's no internet web browser on this.
Elizabeth, were you able to open that medical record that Heather sent, or that was sent to us around 3:55? Today we're at 3:55.
I can try to forward that.
Yeah, I think he wants to see he's asking what exactly you were sent, and hang on.
Yeah, we'll make it part of the record. I mean, I don't have to read the 600 pages before we continue. Not to worry.
Yeah, we'll have to order some food for dinner.
What's that?
I said we'll have to order some food for dinner.
Yeah, well, for hell, Tuesday for me to read that. All right, I think she sent it, and well, no, she doesn't see it. Heather, do you mind sending that medical record to Elizabeth?
Yes, hang on.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Have you had any conversations with anyone regarding this case?
No,
The death of Mr. Saunier?
no.
Did you bring any documents with you?
I mean, I did talk to Heather. That's about it.
All right. About it. Anyone else?
No.
And the documents you brought with you are on your telephone, is that right?
The screenshot of the files that I reviewed, yes.
All right, and what you've reviewed are a number of depositions which you've already shared with us on the record, and roughly half of a 1,300-page medical record. Is that right?
Yes, whatever was sent to me.
Yes.
I don't know if it's half. I don't know if it's half or not. It's just whatever was sent to me.
Well, it's 600 or so pages. Is that right?
That's what I have written on my notes, page 12 of 634, which is the HPI. And so that's why I'm assuming that it's 634.
All right. Any documents that you reviewed other than what you've shared with us on the record here today?
The other document, no, not of the case itself.
Well, anything else regarding, go ahead, regarding the
Yeah, there's this is not regarding the case. This is a paper that I think you're familiar with from Jack in 2016. And then a paper from 2007, again, that was sent to you from 2007, for which I was a co-author on. Those, yes.
So is this was sent at 3:55 today or earlier today?
That's it was, I sent it to the lawyers. Or I can't remember the exact time I sent it.
Okay, what is
but somewhere between.
All right, one document's a 2007 document, one's a 2016 document.
No, the 2016 document wasn't sent because I think it's familiar to this case. It's the Jack article that I think people know about already.
It's the what?
We call it Jack, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology.
Okay.
2016, volume 67, number 21. I think you're familiar with that.
All right, and from 2007?
That's a document. That's this one, which is published in the Annals of Thoracic Surgery when I was at Emory.
Was that a document you were a co-author on that deals with heparin-induced thrombocytopenia?
Yeah, the title is The Impact of Heparin-Induced Thrombocytopenia on Post-Operative Outcomes After Cardiac Surgery. So, yes.
And do you have those in electronic form?
Yes.
Would you send those to me and Elizabeth as well, please, Heather?
They've already been sent. We sent them earlier today at 3:55.
Yeah, I haven't seen what we got at 3:55 for deposition that started at 4.
Well, we sent them to you by share file at 3:55 in advance of the deposition.
All right, Elizabeth, do we have those?
I can't hear her.
I can't either.
The Jack article is the one that Dr. Myung cited. So you've already got that, just so you know. And then the other one we sent today.
What's that?
It's still a message format, so I just sent Miss Johnson another message showing her exactly the title names. And then I just got.
So we don't have it yet.
Not the stuff that's labeled as a message. It's in the message format.
Okay.
We can't open them. So I just sent her an email. I just got something from Heather.
All right, I'm going to make Exhibit 1 the WellStar Keystone Hospital record, the abridged record that you referred to at the beginning of the deposition. You ever given a deposition before?
Once before.
Okay. And in what capacity?
As an expert witness.
All right. Ever given a deposition other than as an expert witness?
I do not recall so.
Okay. You understand your deposition is a public document?
Yes.
And that your video will be available on places like YouTube?
Sure. Great.
And that your deposition is available to your board?
Okay.
I believe you said the American Board of Thoracic Surgery, is that right?
Yeah, right.
You're no longer a fellow at the American College of Surgery, right?
Well, you always are a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. Whether you want to be part of the American College of Surgeons is a different thing. You don't take the fellowship away. I was general surgery trained. I didn't recertify on the boards because I no longer do general surgery for the last 19 years. So you don't have to be a general surgeon if you don't want to, even though you're trained in it. You can just stay within the field of cardiothoracic surgery. So you don't have to do that anymore.
You understand that your deposition is available to physicians you work with,
Okay,
physicians assistants,
sure.
nurse practitioners,
Yeah,
nurses.
okay.
And your CV, which I'll upload now, that accurately depicts your education, training, and background. Is that right?
Yeah, I did send an updated CV. Honestly, I think Heather called me 4 or 5 years ago. I thought this case was, I didn't know it was still ongoing. So my CV is a little bit older. The one I sent today earlier is from February 2024. So it's about 11 months old.
All right. And your opinion, which you've seen, that was provided to us. We'll make that exhibit 3 to your deposition. Have you ever been a party to a lawsuit?
No.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as exhibit 3, deposition. Show you what's been previously marked as exhibit 3.
Okay,
This
James,
appears
this
to
is
be,
gonna be James, this is gonna be a problem. He's gonna have to walk way up here because we're on a screen that's about 6 feet wide. But what we see from you is about 12 inches wide, and then the document itself is maybe 6 inches wide. So are you showing him the expert ID?
for the record, this is a complaint filed by William Crowden and Linda Crowden. It was filed in the State Court of DeKalb County, State of Georgia, civil action file number 16A61660. The defendants are, the first one is Vinod H, Thourani, Thourani, MD, Eric Sarin, MD, Shan Dan Reddy, Deva Reddy, MD, Amy Salmon, PA, Maduri Earnshaw, PA, the Emory Clinic, Inc., and Emory Healthcare, Inc. Can you see that all right, doctor?
No, can't see that at all, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just told me you'd never been a party to a lawsuit. Is this a different Vinod H. Thourani, MD?
No, I do recall that being there on one of my Eric Sarin. I do recall this now. Sorry, it's one of my partner's surgeries that I was helping him with.
Do you understand the nature of the oath you took earlier, Mr. Thourani?
Yeah, I clearly did forget this one. I don't recall it. Did not recall it.
Are there any others that you did not recall then that maybe you recall now?
No, I cannot recall of any other that I can remember of.
This, do you recall having a patient, William Crowden?
I do remember this patient, actually.
Okay. And this is you, Vinod H. Thourani, MD, right?
I can't see the screen, but if you're reading it, then
Let me see if I can help you. How about now?
Yeah.
Can you see
You
that?
need to walk up
Yeah,
there.
you mind if I'm gonna walk just for the.
I can make this as big as, well, I mean,
I see it.
Nope.
Yeah, I can see it.
Actually, I think I can make it just a bit bigger.
Yeah, I can see my name.
The plaintiff, you see this is in the State Court of DeKalb County, State of Georgia. Do you see that?
I don't see it, but I do recall that Emory University Midtown, which is where this is in DeKalb County.
Okay. And the civil action file number, that's the case number, is 16A61660. Is that right?
Okay.
And you're a defendant in this case.
Yes.
Let's skip on down to page 6. You see where it reads facts?
No, I cannot see that.
Okay, let me see if I can. How about now? Can you see it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can.
Begins at page 6. See where it reads, see this paragraph 37?
No, I can't see that.
Okay, it reads, on June 30, 2014, William Crowden, that was your patient, right? William Crowden?
He was a patient of our service, yeah.
To the office of Vinod H. Thourani, MD, that's you, right?
Yep.
At the Emory Clinic for surgical consultation and management of Mr. Crowden's aortic valve stenosis. Do you see that?
I don't see it, but if you're reading it, then we have to take your word on it.
Well, I mean, do you recall that Mr. Crowden came to see you about an aortic valve stenosis, right?
Yes.
And also present at the visit was his wife, Linda Crowden, right?
I can't recall if she was there or not.
Okay. Moving on down to paragraph 39, during the aforesaid June 30, 2014 meeting, Dr. Thourani, that's you, told and represented to the Crowdens that he would order various heart studies to be performed, and depending on the results of the studies, Mr. Crowden's qualification for transcatheter aortic valve replacement, TAVR, surgery, Dr. Thourani would perform the surgery on William Crowden. Do you remember telling your patient that you would perform a surgery?
No, I don't recall any of that. As far as me doing it, it's the idea that a valve procedure will be performed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, have you ever misrepresented to patients that you would be performing their surgery when you would not be performing the surgery?
No, because it's the way that we've run our practice has been a team approach. That's what I'm nationally known for. And so we don't tell them that it'll be a individual person, especially for TAVR, since it's a dual procedure performed with surgery and cardiology. In fact, it's CMS violation for me to perform it by myself. It has to be jointly done with surgery and cardiology together, and it's a team approach to that.
How many colleagues did you have working with you in 2014? That's 10 years ago.
Object to the form. You can answer.
What is colleagues define?
Did you work in a group with other surgeons?
Yes.
How many?
I don't recall how many surgeons we had at Emory in 2014.
Was it more or less than 5?
It was more than 5.
More or less than 10?
I don't remember the exact number.
Okay. Less than 10, but more than 5?
I don't remember the exact number.
I didn't ask you for an exact number. I said less than 5 or more than 10.
Object to form, asked and answered. You can answer again.
Probably more than 10.
Okay. Have you ever told any patient that you would be performing that patient's surgery and had other doctors perform that patient's surgery?
That is a possibility because there's emergencies that happen there. And so surgeons don't always perform their own surgery depending on what happens with the situation. And especially for the procedure of transcatheter aortic valve replacement, it is relatively common that a team of doctors is going to do it. So there is no one person who says they're always going to do those.
Right. Now with your patient, Mr. Crowden, though, you didn't participate in that surgery at all.
No, like I said, we have a team effort. We have a surgeon and a cardiologist. perform that procedure, and that's relatively common for that to happen. Like I've said, I don't know what happened to the screen there.
Well, that's, you answered that question. My question was a little different. You did not perform in Mr. Crowden's surgery at all. You did not participate in it at all, right?
So do you have, oh, the screen, okay, the screen went blurry on our end, that's why we were just waiting to see that. No, the TAVR procedure was performed by Dr. Sarin and Dr. Deveretti.
All right. And not you.
No, like I said, it was a team effort, and so it's the team that was on for that day.
But you weren't part of the team that performed the surgery on Mr. Crowden, right?
No, I was not the surgeon that was there for that transcatheter aortic valve replacement.
No. This is paragraph 40, page 7. Reads here, Amy, is it Simone?
Yeah.
Stated and represented that Dr. Thourani would be performing the TAVR surgery at Emory University Midtown Hospital on September 30th, 2014. Were you aware of that?
I cannot recall what Amy Simone wrote.
Okay. Paragraph 41. The morning of September 29, 2014, Mr. Crowden presented to Emory University Midtown Hospital and was seen by Dr. Thourani's physician assistant, Madhuri Earnshaw. Do you remember Madhuri Earnshaw?
Yes, Madhuri Earnshaw, yes.
Presented to Mr. Crowden for his signature the surgical consent form listing Dr. Thourani as the surgeon, providing consent to Dr. Thourani to perform the TAVR surgical procedure. You see that?
I cannot see that, no.
Okay. Do you recall that?
I do not recall that.
All right. Do you have patients sign consent forms, surgical consent forms?
Do I personally do the consent forms?
Before you perform surgery, do your patients sign a surgical consent form?
Yeah, I mean, that's standard of care, yes.
Okay, that's required, right?
Yes.
And you have your patients sign a consent form with your name as a surgeon on it, even when you're not going to participate in the surgery at all?
I don't obtain the consent forms, and so that's not something that I do. I can't comment on what Madhuri wrote because that's not my job description well, I don't do that necessarily, so.
Okay. But Madhuri was your employee in September 2014, right?
She was the employee of Emory Healthcare, not of me personally.
She was a physician's assistant, right?
Yes.
And a physician's assistant is required to work under a physician. Is that right?
Yes.
And the name physician that Madhuri Earnshaw was working under in September 2014, was that your name?
I don't recall if she was under my name or not.
Paragraph 43. The only surgeon's name listed on the aforesaid consent form was Dr. Thourani's, consistent with Mr. and Mrs. Crowden's clear understanding that Dr. Thourani was a doctor who was going to perform the TAVR surgery. Do you recall that?
Sorry, was that? No, I do not.
No recollection at all.
I do not.
You did testify earlier that you do remember Mr. Crowden as your patient. Tell me what you do remember about him.
Back to the form. You can answer.
Yeah. A lot of patients are sent to me from the Southeast. And so as kind of the main input into it, and then commonly it's the patients are done by the team depending on who's available. And so Dr. Sarin is a member of the valve team, the Emory valve team that I created during that time when I was at Emory. And so I do remember seeing the patient. And he was performed on the day that Dr. Sarah and Dr. Deveretti were doing TAVRs.
And do you remember being sued by Mr. and Mrs. Crowden?
I did not remember that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said what I did earlier.
Okay. And you have no recollection of it now?
Well, I have a recollection now. That's why I said I did remember the patient.
Okay. But you don't remember being sued, is that right?
I didn't recall that, no.
Okay. And you were insured at the time, is that right?
As an employee of Emory Healthcare, I was.
And your policy of insurance provided, in order for a case to be settled, you had to consent to that settlement, right?
I do not remember that, but if so, it is.
And you consented to settle the Crowden's case, right?
Object to form.
Once again, I don't remember the settlement.
I wasn't asking you whether you remembered the settlement. My question was whether you consented to the settlement.
I don't recall.
Okay. 44, on the evening of September 29, 2014, William and Linda Crowden were visited in the hospital room by Vinod Thourani, MD, and his physician's assistant, Amy Simone. Do you recall visiting with them on the eve of his surgery?
No, I do not.
Dr. Thourani then stated that everything was going to be okay and he looked forward to performing the surgery tomorrow. Do you recall telling your patient that?
No, I do not.
Do you typically tell your patients before you perform surgery that you look forward to performing their surgery and that everything is going to be okay?
No, that's not normally what I tell because there's risk associated with every procedure. So I don't tell them that everything is always going to be okay. Generically speaking.
At this time, Amy Simone, your physician's assistant, told the Crowdens that she would also be seeing Mr. Crowden because she assisted in all of the TAVR procedures performed by Dr. Thourani. Do you see that?
I do not see that.
Okay. Do you recall that?
No, I do not.
Do you recall that Amy Simone, your physician's assistant, assisted you in surgery?
No, she does not assist in the surgery.
She never assisted you.
No, she never assisted us during the surgery.
Did she? Well, what was her role?
She was helping coordinate the preoperative and manage the postoperative components of the procedure, but did not perform the TAVR procedure, nor the open cardiac surgery procedures.
Nor assist you in those procedures.
Did not assist during the procedures.
Paragraph 46. September 30th, 2014, unbeknownst to the Crowdens, Mr. Crowden's TAVR surgery was performed not by Dr. Thourani, but instead by two other doctors that were never mentioned or discussed in relation to the surgery, Dr. Shandareddy and Dr. Sarin. Is that right?
Yes, Chandan Deveretti and Eric Sarin.
Those were two of your partners?
No, doctor, like I said earlier, the TAVR procedure is performed by a cardiologist and a surgeon. Dr. Sarin is a cardiac surgeon, part of the valve team, and Dr. Deveretti is a cardiologist, an interventional cardiologist who jointly performed the procedures.
What was the name of your group in 2014?
Emory Healthcare Cardiac Surgery.
And neither of these physicians were part of that group?
Yes. Eric Sarin is a cardiac surgeon who was part of Emory as a partner. Dr. Deveretti is an interventional cardiologist at Emory within the division of cardiology, not a surgeon.
They were both part of your group, though.
Well, it depends what the group is. Dr. Deveretti is not a cardiac surgeon, so he can't be a part of the group.
So what?
Dr. Sarin's, if you mean group Emory Healthcare, yes. If you mean a cardiac surgery group, no, you can't be a cardiologist and be a heart surgeon.
So Sarin was your partner, Deveretti was not.
Correct.
Mr. Crowden at no time had given consent to either of these doctors to perform his TAVR procedure.
I'm going to object to the form.
Yeah, again, I don't do the consents.
Mr. Crowden's TAVR surgery, Dr. Deveretti and Dr. Sarin, who did not have consent to perform the surgery, pushed instrumentation through the ventricle wall of Mr. Crowden's heart, causing bleeding around his heart and tamponade. Are you aware of that?
I do remember that.
And when were you made aware of that?
After this happened, I was in the operating room, and so I found out about it then.
You went to the operating room after you learned about it.
No, I was performing open heart surgery when this happened.
In a different operating room.
Yeah, I was on the second floor. They were, I think, on the fourth floor or something like that.
You said you were performing an open heart surgery, is that right? On the same day?
Yeah.
Where you actually,
So
opened the heart?
Well, that's what open heart surgery is. We
Oh.
open the heart. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. But a TAVR procedure is done in the cath lab, and it is a transcatheter aortic valve replacement. Commonly, like I said, done by a surgeon and a cardiologist. A open heart surgery is a surgical procedure which is performed in a true operating room.
And open heart surgery includes what?
Objective form, overbroad, you can answer.
There's textbooks written about what open heart surgery is, but it relates to coronary bypass surgery, aortic valve replacement, mitral valve repair, aortic aneurysm, LV aneurysm, anomalous coronary artery. I mean, we can keep going for a long time to the list of different procedures if you want.
And you call, I mean, is a CABG an open heart procedure?
Yeah, that's the coronary artery bypass. That's the first thing that I said. Yep.
And tell me, in the history of medicine, any medical school textbook, treatise, peer-reviewed article, non-peer-reviewed article, grand rounds, round throwaways that said a CABG is an open heart procedure where you open the heart. Name one.
A coronary bypass, there is a colloquial use of open heart surgery, which
Sorry, what was
is
that word you said? Colloquial? Yeah, colloquial. What does colloquial mean? What does colloquial mean?
Yeah, it's a common type of just slang term of open heart surgery when you're opening the chest up. And so open chested surgery is what we're talking about when you mean open heart surgery. In some instances, you actually open the heart. In some instances, you're actually not opening the heart, but the coronary arteries are located epicardially, and you're not opening it, but you're opening the coronary arteries. So difference between opening the chamber of the heart and opening the coronary arteries. But either way, you're making a hole in a blood vessel somehow to gain access to the heart or to the blood vessel supplying the heart.
You realize that Mr. Saunier died, right?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah. And you're testifying as an expert in his case?
Yes.
Right. And I'm not here for slang. If you're using what you call slang medical terms, please let me know that this is slang and not really an open heart procedure. All right?
I object to the form. It's insulting, but
Yeah.
subject to that, he can answer.
That is insulting to me. And
So colloquial is not colloquial. I was trying to explain for yours, since you asked me what colloquial meant. I was explaining what colloquial meant, but that in itself is not slang. It's a well described word in the dictionary.
have you ever pushed an instrument through the ventricle wall?
Yes.
Have you ever had a patient die of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia?
Yes.
About how many?
I don't know the exact numbers of how many.
What's that?
I don't know the exact number of how many.
All right.
Over 19 years of practice, I don't know the exact number.
More than 100?
No.
Less than 100?
my entire career, forget the HIT, I haven't had over 100 people die, period.
How many HIT?
Less than 10
Okay.
over a year of over 19 years and over 7,000 or 8,000 heart surgeries.
Back to exhibit, is this exhibit 4, Madam Court Reporter? Is that right?
You haven't officially identified it as 4, but we are on number 4.
Yeah, exhibit 4, paragraph 48, Mr. Crowden required an emergency pericardiocentesis, as well as 3 other emergent surgeries that day, including emergent sternotomy and pericardial window, repair of cardiac wound, mediastinal re-exploration, evacuation of hematoma, and further repair of a heart wall tear, and a 3rd additional mediastinal re-exploration with washout. Did you perform any of those procedures?
I did perform, the pericardiocentesis was performed in the cath lab by Dr. Deveretti and Dr. Sarin. And then they informed me, because I was downstairs, like I said, in the open heart surgery. And I asked them how that was going, and they told me, and I said the patient should come downstairs for surgery. And they did bring the patient down. Dr. Sarin did bring the patient down to the operating room and open his chest because of the continued bleeding from the pericardiocentesis.
Paragraph 49, as a further result of the tear in the heart wall, Mr. Crowden sustained cardiac arrest, prolonged hypoxia, multiple blood transfusions, 8 days of ventilation, AFib, hypoxic ischemic neurological damage, prolonged hospitalization and rehabilitation. Is that right?
Yes, I do remember that.
In other words, he was deprived of oxygen to his brain for some period of time, right?
I can't tell you exact, not necessarily. CPR, if done appropriately, can maintain blood flow to the brain and to the heart.
No time during Mr. Crowden's admission at Emory University Midtown Hospital, which began on September 29, 2014, did anyone inform the Crowdens that Dr. Thourani had not performed or otherwise participated in the September 30, 2014 TAVR procedure? It's not until a review of the Emory University Midtown Hospital records subsequently obtained did the Crowdens learn that TAVR procedure was performed entirely by 2 doctors with whom the Crowdens were unfamiliar and to whom consent was never given.
Is there a question?
Now, do you recall that?
Object to form.
I don't.
Answer.
I don't recall that. And just FYI, a cardiologist has to see the patient prior to a TAVR procedure for CMS reasons. So just a generic statement. So it doesn't, I'm not sure that a interventional cardiologist, and Dr. Deveretti was the only interventional cardiologist doing TAVRs at Emory Midtown. So I imagine that he did see him in a clinic office because it was required for that to happen. So.
No. Weren't they also required to get a surgical consent form if they were going to be performing surgery?
Object to form. You can answer.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, under what authority do you have for that?
Authority for what?
That you can, that you don't have to have a physician that's going to be performing a surgery on a consent form.
In fact, the patient in the cath lab is actually posted under Dr. Deveretti. And so it's not even posted under my name. So even if the consent had every person in America on the consent, it's still going to be posted under Dr. Deveretti's name. It's not going to be posted under my name because I had no privileges in the cath lab. So it's a team effort, and you don't need multiple consents from different physicians. It's one consent.
So any physician's name on the consent will do.
It's from the consent of whoever took it for the physician or the group. But you need one consent. You don't need one from Dr. Deveretti, one from everybody else.
You need one from a physician that's performing the surgery, right?
Theoretically, again, I don't do the consents, and so I'm not the one who fills those out.
That wasn't my question. Would you read back my question, please, Madam Court Reporter?
You need one from the physician that's performing the surgery, right?
Objective form, legal conclusion, you can answer.
Again, I do not do the consents, and so I'm not the one who fills those out.
So you don't know.
No,
See where it reads count one, fraud? You see?
I can't see it. No, I can't see it.
You were sued for fraud, among other things, right?
I don't recall that, but if that's what it says on the document.
And it reads here, paragraph 54, at the time these representations were made, said defendants knew them to be false. Said representations were made with the intention and purpose of deceiving Mr. and Mrs. Crowden. Did you intend to deceive Mr. and Mrs. Crowden when you told them you would be performing their surgery?
Object to the form, you can answer.
I don't recall thinking that I was going to perform it. It's generally my custom over 19 years to tell them that the plan is for them to have cardiac surgery or a procedure by our team members or me. That's what my practice has always been.
All right. And you recall that you had a deposition scheduled, and before your deposition, you consented to settle the case, right?
Object to the form.
I don't recall that.
You don't recall consenting to settle the case?
I do not remember that. Otherwise, I would have mentioned it at the very beginning.
Okay. You recall a trans cardiac therapeutics?
Object to form. You can
On what
answer if you can.
basis?
I don't understand what that means.
What?
Do you recall
So-
trans cardiac therapeutics?
Same objection, you can answer.
A company?
You don't recall any other lawsuits, right? That you were a party to?
That for medical stuff? No, don't.
No, I didn't say for medical and stuff. Did I?
No, I again, related to, assumption since we're in a medical discussion here, that's what I thought yours meant.
So you don't recall being sued also in 2016 by Trans Cardiac Therapeutics?
Actually, no.
Okay. Do you recall being sued in 2011?
No, I
Okay.
don't.
Any other suits that you recall that you didn't recall earlier?
No.
Okay. You ever testify as an expert on behalf of anyone at Huff Powell Bailey?
I can't remember the last, like I said, I had one deposition that I remember.
All right. Do you remember helping the law firm Huff Powell Bailey with a medical case, even though you didn't not testify? All right. What
I
about
don't recall.
Wethington or anyone in his firm?
I do remember there was a legal proceeds here at Piedmont Hospital that I was asked to be an expert witness on, but then I moved when I was in Washington, DC. But then when I moved to Atlanta, obviously for a conflict, because they were now my partners, recused myself.
Any other cases?
No, that I can recall.
Do you recall seeing that Mr. Saunier had a stent placed in 2012?
I read that in his medical history report. Yeah.
And when you undergo a cabbage procedure, if you've had a previous stent placement, that doubles your risk for HIT.
Objective form, you can answer.
No, not necessarily. I would say that 95 to 98% of the coronary bypass surgeries that we do here already have previous stents. And so if that were the case, then the majority of our patients that we do surgery on would have HIT. So not necessarily.
I'm going to show you what, are we on number 5, Madam Court Reporter?
Yes.
And show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 5 to your deposition. Can you see that on the screen?
I cannot see that.
You want to get closer to the screen?
Sure. I mean, I can't read the verbiage. It's looks like just chicken scratch at this point.
Looks like what?
It looks like jumbled letters, but it's incomprehensible.
Madam Court Reporter, can you see the screen I'm sharing all right?
Yes, I can.
James,
Uh-huh.
let me explain to you why we're having a hard time seeing. We are on a screen that is like 6 feet wide, okay? But what you are showing us on the screen is about 6 inches wide. So it's just really hard to see, and we cannot figure out how to increase the size of what your screen's sharing.
All right, and for the record, I've got, what I am sharing is taking up my entire screen. So I'm doing what I can to make it as large as I can.
No, we understand. We're not trying to be difficult. We're just trying to explain to you why what your screen sharing looks so small. Can you identify the document?
Sure. This is an article entitled Impact of Heparin-Induced Thrombocytopenia on Post-Operative Outcomes After Cardiac Surgery.
Yeah, the article that he co-authored and he produced. He's got a hard copy in front of him if you want to direct him to it.
This is 2007. Is that right?
Yes, he's got his copy.
If you would flip them back to, it reads comments. These are your comments. Is that right?
Well, this is the comments of the co-authors. Yes.
Well, I mean, is there anything, false or fraudulent in this article?
No, there's not.
Comment, this is page 5 of 8. It reads, you agree that heparin-induced thrombocytopenia is a potentially life-threatening problem frequently encountered in cardiac surgery, right?
Yeah, so we're on page 1552, column 1, or the left-hand column, right underneath the comment, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
You agree that heparin-induced thrombocytopenia has a nearly 25% mortality rate?
It can, yes.
That thrombocytopenia is often the first clinical sign of HIT.
Yes,
And HIT, by HIT, we're talking about heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, right?
yes.
Thrombocytopenia is often the first clinical sign of HIT, which prompts further laboratory testing, right?
Yes,
And by further laboratory testing, you mean a HIT panel?
yes.
Diagnosis of HIT is often delayed. Can you see me
Sorry, is that a
pointing?
question or? Oh,
It is.
okay. Uh, is it commonly delayed? I'm not, it's a kind of an open-ended question. I'm not, it can be delayed if you did, but.
I'm
I'm not
reading
sure.
your article here.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
your name on the
Where-
first page. Sir?
I'm sorry, where are you? I'm sorry, I'm not following where you are. Sorry.
Sure. What you've written in this article is, however, because thrombocytopenia is a nonspecific finding in a large proportion of cardiac surgery patients, the diagnosis of HIT is often delayed, right?
Yes, I see that. I see that.
And you agree with that?
It can be, yes.
Furthermore, in some patients with HIT, the associated hypercoagulable state may develop before detectable drop in the platelet count. You agree with that?
Yes,
Therefore, it is possible that the clinical sequelae of HIT may be under-recognized and inadequately treated. You agree with that?
Yep. Yep.
Average interval between the dates of surgery to laboratory confirmation of diagnosis was 8.5 plus or minus 8 days. Is that right?
yes,
So 8.5 days plus or minus 8 is like half a day to 16.5 days, right?
yes. Yes, that's why we commonly use median instead of mean or standard with standard deviations.
HIT-associated thrombotic events may occur before the diagnosis is firmly established.
I'm sorry, where are you now? I'm sorry.
Paragraph toward the bottom. Yeah, I'll read it from the beginning. During this period, that's a half a day to 16.5 days, HIT-associated thrombotic events may occur before the diagnosis is firmly established. Right?
Yes,
By confirmatory tests and before the initiation of anticoagulation therapy.
yes,
One of the objectives of this study was to establish a preoperative risk factor profile. Do you see that?
yes.
That's one of the things you did.
Was one of the things we looked at because during the time in 2007, we really analyzed patients from that time period, which is really before patients with HIT had even become well known in cardiac surgery. So, HIT and looking at HIT during cardiac surgery was an interest of mine when I started my practice in 2005. And so, I've spent 19 years kind of following this. This is one of, again, the earlier studies to talk about cardiac surgery and HIT. So it was an interest for us to try to figure out some of these patients.
And if you skip down to the next paragraph,
Yeah.
see where it reads patients with previous percutaneous coronary intervention, PCI, had a nearly twofold increase in the incidence of HIT. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Can you agree with that?
I agree to some extent because those are patients that commonly have procedures usually within 3 to 6 months. And so they, have procedures that 2 months ago, and then they come back for a failed stent. And so you're got your heparin exposure about 2 or 3 months ago, and then you come back about, a couple months later and have your heart surgery. And that's where we see that a decent amount. We did not see that necessarily in the remote years ago, but it's more remote PCIs more than anything else. But that's part of the study that was our study did not specify exact timing from PCI to when the actual cardiac surgery was done. We didn't have that granular of data.
You agree that a stent is a PCI?
A percutaneous coronary intervention is a stent. We prefer to use coronary intervention because it's not slang term.
All right. Do you recall when we pulled up your article, the question I'd ask you was whether Mr. Saunier's previous stent could double the likelihood of him suffering HIT after his CABG, coronary artery bypass graft. You said you didn't think so, although that's what you wrote in this article, right?
No,
You can answer.
that's not 100% what I said in this article. This article, the stent was done in 2012, which is not a couple of months before the surgery, which was performed, in 2018. So, obviously, 6 years later. So in this, what we have written here, it does not say 6 years, 2 months, 3 months. From clinical experience, it's usually 2 to 3 months ahead of time is when you think about that more than you do years ago. Because if that were the case, almost every patient who has coronary artery bypass grafting has a high chance for HIT, which we know is not the case.
And that's not the case. How?
Because we know that most patients who have coronary artery bypass grafting don't have HIT necessarily.
So nowhere in your article does it say that depending on when you had the PCI or stent placement, that would impact whether that doubled your likelihood to have HIT, right?
That's exactly right. So when you ask me the question if Mr. Saunier's PCI had any impact, that's why I said not necessarily, because from our data, we did not have the granularity of months or years. But again, from my expert opinion, having done over 7,000 or 8,000 hearts, understanding HIT since I was studying HIT since I was in 2005, that we've usually seen that a couple of months ahead of time, not years ahead of time.
All right. Same page, second column, 8.2. As the number of cardiac surgery patients with previous PCI and symptomatic heart failure increases, surgeons must be aware of this potential risk and act promptly if any suspicion for HIT exists, right?
Yes.
And again, you tie the increased incidence of HIT to a previous PCI or stent.
Yes. And just a clarification, also around this time, we were seeing a lot of new coronary stents being introduced, and we're seeing a lot more early thrombosis. And so that was a particular interest to us at that time, because we were seeing a lot of patients come back at 3 or 4 months after their stent procedure who needed coronary bypass surgery. So all of that, again, in 2007, that all made sense at that point. But again, like I said, we didn't have the granularity to look at the timing.
You agree that heparin-induced thrombocytopenia remains predominantly a clinical diagnosis based on the presence of thrombocytopenia and thromboembolic events?
Yes, I think that it is predominantly a clinical diagnosis. And you had asked me earlier of patients of mine that had passed away, and I've had some, as has most surgeons. And commonly the first time that we see it is when we see their toes being black, or we see a stroke. We see clinical signs that lead to thromboembolism. We see pulmonary embolism. We see a DVT. Those are the things that first allow us to know that the patient had HIIT.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you agree that a fall in the platelet count is an indicator of possible HIT, right?
Objective form, you can answer.
A certain percentage of platelet count can be an indication. Not just any platelet count drop is an indication.
And
So
the
I think that has to be. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you.
So I think it's common after heart surgery, on pump or off pump coronary bypass surgery, to see a drop in platelet count. That is normal. And the reason is because we're, as there is bleeding during open heart surgery, we either use something called cell saver, or we use the cardiopulmonary bypass circuitry, both of which decrease the platelet count. So it's common after cardiac surgery to see a lower blood count. By nature, that is the fact of cardiac surgery.
And you also use heparin, right?
Yes, we do use heparin.
In the procedure itself.
During the open heart surgery.
Well, not just open heart surgeries. I mean, a CABG, a coronary artery bypass graft or CABG, you don't actually open the heart, right?
We went through this, I think, coronary bypass surgery, we're still opening the coronary arteries. We're not opening the aorta, the left atrium, or the left ventricle, but we are opening the coronary arteries, which happen to be part of the heart. And again, open heart surgery, meaning a sternotomy, is considered that. And so coronary bypass grafting is considered open heart surgery. Just for clarification, a closed heart surgery would be like a TAVR procedure when the actual chest is not being opened up. Since you brought up TAVR earlier today.
Well, opening the chest and opening the heart are two different things, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's why, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that.
Yeah, there's two different things. And so when you say you're going to do an aortic valve replacement, a surgical aortic replacement, you are opening the aorta. When you're doing coronary bypass surgery, that is still all considered open heart surgery because you're opening the chest, you're opening the sternum. But you are correct that there's two differences of open heart surgery, i.e. opening the sternum, and open heart surgery as in opening the heart and the blood vessels surrounding it.
The PF4 heparin ELISA test used in the study, the serotonin release assay, heparin-induced platelet activation assay, and the platelet aggregation test, those are all HIT tests, panels, right?
Yes.
And they all, you feel like all of those are work? Is that right?
They all have different sensitivities and specificities. The SRA is the HODAD, as far as it's the kind of the final point, but we all start with the ELISA test because it's quicker to get back. So we always start with the ELISA test first.
And was the ELISA test ordered in Mr. Saunier's case?
It was.
And that was ordered stat, right?
They all are ordered stat.
And serial assays performed until the diagnosis is firmly established or refuted. You order serial assays, right? Serial panels.
Not necessarily, no.
This is continuing on to the next page. In this series, among patients with a negative initial assay, that a subsequent second, third, or fourth assay, and by that we're talking about the HIT panels, right?
Yes.
28% ultimately had a positive result on follow-up tests. Furthermore, 91% of these positive results occurred on the second or third assay. 91%, right?
I'm trying to find that, sorry.
Sure. 1553, top left.
Oh, I see it. Yeah. Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Therefore, if the clinical suspicion for HIT exists, the assay should be performed a minimum of 3 times. Do you see that?
Yes.
So I misunderstood you. I think what just a moment ago you said, I thought not necessarily.
Yeah, so what we found in the study, which was kind of an interesting finding, is those patients who have, where this really makes sense, is those patients that have endocarditis. So endocarditis is an infection of the valves within the heart from a variety of reasons. And what we found is those patients commonly have a ramped up inflammation system, very different than the patient that we're discussing here today. And in endocarditis, what the first test sometimes is negative, and so every 48 hours or so we draw another one, especially if they continue to have platelet counts in their 30s and 40s and pretty profound platelet counts, especially in those patients who don't have balloon pumps or any other reason to have issues. So that was kind of something that we came out of this trial, which I thought was unique and kind of had changed. It became a change in practice. Quite honestly, it started becoming the standard where people would do that every couple of days, specifically in those patients that have endocarditis or a revved up immunologic system that we're thinking about. So that was kind of what came about of this and kind of helped change practice across the world.
You're a minimum of 3 times, despite a negative initial result, right?
Like I said, if the patient had clinically continued to have profound thrombocytopenia and they had endocarditis, which is an inflammatory state, then that's what we're saying is you keep on doing that if you continue to have severe thrombocytopenia, usually under 50,000. So it's not across the board. It's for those patients that have an inflammatory response that is ongoing with no other explanation, like a balloon pump or ECMO. I
don't see any of that here, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, not everything is in the document because a lot of it is, how we ended up, where it came from. I know more than the document. Like most people are just reading documents. Since we did the study, we have more knowledge about that. I have more knowledge about that.
In our practice, you're talking about your practice, we have a high clinical suspicion for HIT. We will initiate treatment with alternative anticoagulation despite a negative initial assay, right?
When it's appropriate, yes.
And you determine when it's appropriate by looking at something called the 4 T's. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's also something that we kind of didn't discuss is that we do look at the 4 T's. They weren't as, in 2007, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, but also, for us, it was a platelet count drop of 50% or an absolute platelet count of less than 100,000. That was our trigger. So I think you have to look at the methods of what this study was done. And that shows, again, the suspicion was those patients with a platelet count of less than 100,000 or a drop of 50%. So not across the board, did we start anticoagulation.
But if you have a drop of 50%, what?
This study is also done in 2007. So again, the practice is very different in 2025 than it was in 2007.
Well, this article you brought to your deposition though, right?
Yes, I did.
So a drop in platelet count of 50%. That's
I'm sorry. I'm not sure. Was that a question?
Did you drop out? Did you cut out? Are y'all there?
I don't. What did you?
50? We just heard 50, and then we didn't hear anything after that.
A drop in the platelet count of 50%. That's a concern.
Yes. Or for this study, also we used platelet count less than 100,000.
Or less than 100.
Yeah, that's in the methods. And if you look on page 15, let me just comment on that. You look at page 1549, first column, the HIT assays were typically performed for persistent post-operative thrombocythemia, platelet count less than 100,000. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to point that out.
1553, left corner bottom. Although we did not consider the impact of heparin dosing on HIT, this analysis we plan to do so in the future, in a future study with a larger number of isolated coronary artery bypass graft surgery patients, comparing on pump to off pump coronary artery bypass graft surgery with varying heparin doses. Do you recall whether Mr. Saunier was on a pump?
No, he was off pump.
The high morbidity and mortality rate in the HIT positive group in this study has prompted us to become increasingly vigilant with early investigation of post-operative thrombocytopenia. You agree with that?
Yes, specifically for those patients that had a 50% drop or a platelet count less than 100,000, of which neither did Mr. Saunier actually have.
Okay. With the likelihood of previous heparin exposure from prior hospitalizations, surgical procedures, and percutaneous coronary interventions, one anticipates that HIT will become increasingly problematic among patients undergoing cardiac surgery. Do you see that?
Yeah, that was specific. Like I said earlier, that was specific for all the stent changes that were occurring. And we were seeing patients coming back within 3 to 4 months of their initial PCIs. And those are the ones that we were more worried about.
Our awareness should be heightened so that the diagnosis of HIT can be confirmed as soon as possible, and treatment with alternative anticoagulants initiated before the onset of associated thromboembolic complications, right?
Yes, especially
that's
in those
what you
patients
suggest, right?
Especially in those patients who have a platelet count less than 100,000 or a drop in 50%. You have to look at the methods and decide that. It's not, you can't take blanket statements and little bits out without looking at the context of what the study was designed for and looking at those parameters. Again, even in the methods, a 50% drop, platelet count, or an absolute count of 100,000. That's what we're talking about. We can't just take isolated tidbits out and say we're making blanket statements, honestly.
Yeah, I'm going through what you wrote. Do you stand by what you wrote here or not?
I stand by what I wrote, but you have to read the methods. You can't take that out of exclusion. That's not fair. And that's quite honestly, when it comes to academics, that's not an appropriate thing to do.
Do you agree it's appropriate to be truthful in a deposition when you're under oath?
Yes.
Are we at a spot where we can take a quick break?
Sure.
For a moment. Thank you. We're gonna go off the record
Anytime you want to take a break, just let me know.
to get a drink. So we're off the record. Thank you.
I'm
Is every-
here.
I don't know about everybody. I'm James Potts.
Yeah, Heather and I are here.
Okay. If we're ready, I can go back on the record at 5:42 PM.
I'm ready, Madam Court Reporter.
Thank you. Back on the record at 5:42 PM.
We're on Exhibit 6, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 6. This laboratory report, I don't remember you mentioning this earlier, and I haven't seen the 600 pages of medical records. Have you reviewed this document?
I'm walking up to see what I can see, but I don't,
Fine, take your time.
yeah, I can't read it, honestly. It's like, really small letters.
Here, let me make it.
Yeah.
Does that help or no?
It's still pretty.
Hold on. How about that? That's as big as I can make it.
Yeah, we can see stuff that there's black and white there, but you can't actually read any of the words. Does that make sense?
James, why don't you tell him what it is
Yeah.
and we can tell you if he's
Yeah.
seen it.
This is the laboratory report for Billy Lee Saunier.
If
Keystone Hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Yep.
If
Well-
it was part of the records that I did, but I don't recall that I have. I'm looking at my phone again just to look at that. I mean, if it was part of the WellStar Keystone, medical file, then I did. If it wasn't, then I have not.
All right, this has been marked as Exhibit 6 to your deposition. I'm going to scroll on down to, I think it's going to be page 2. Page 2 of 5. I don't know whether you have this.
Hey,
Yep.
James, can we take a brief break? I think it might help. I have my laptop with me. I'm gonna log on to Zoom so that he'll be able to see the exhibits from my laptop.
Of course.
'Cause
You
we-
just
we-
let me know when you're
Okay,
ready.
let's just take a really brief break. So
Thank you.
Back on the record at 5:49 PM.
I'll show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 6 to your deposition. Have you seen this document before?
I don't recall this document per se, no. You said, if I remember, you said a 4-page PDF.
It's actually 5.
Okay, yeah. I don't recall a separate 5-page PDF. I do obviously remember the values that were in the medical record, the larger file.
Right. Yeah, this was this is a separate document. This did not come with the medical record, this certified copy of the medical record that we were.
You ready?
Star. So you don't recall seeing this though, as you said.
No.
I'm going to scroll on down to page 2 of 5 of Exhibit 6. And you see where it reads X13726113 over on the left.
I do.
And COLL, that stands for collection, right?
Yes.
And that's a collection date of 11/25/2018. At
Yes.
11:20.
AM. Right.
RAC, that means received 11/25/2018 at 12:02. The physician is Richard Mayung.
Yes,
Right? Do you know Richard Mayung?
I do.
Have you worked with him in the past?
He was a former resident of mine.
All right. And this is for a patient, you see up here at the top, Keystone WellStar
do.
Hospital, Billy Lee
Yeah.
Saunier, right?
Yes, sir.
And this is, you see where it reads heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, AB hit antibody. AB stands for antibody.
Yes, it does.
All right, so this is a heparin, a hit antibody test assay. Is that right?
Yes.
And it reads here, it was ordered stat. You said how they're all ordered stat, right?
Yes, in our practice and commonly they're ordered stat. Yes.
And part of the reason is, like you wrote in your article, I mean, physicians like yourself have to be especially vigilant after a heart surgery for patients that are receiving heparin. Is that right?
Who have received heparin? Yes, or receiving. Yes.
Reads present heparin-induced thrombocytopenia antibody present. And what that means is this patient is suffering from heparin-induced thrombocytopenia.
Object to the form. You can answer.
So this is one test. If we have this test, we are commonly confirm it with an SRA test. If we have a positive test, then we turn around and order an SRA test.
And of course, an SOA test is what?
The serotonin release assay test.
And of course, you can't do a serotonin release assay test on a patient that's already dead, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Do you see under antibody present, patient expired?
I do see that.
Called to Barbara Arian at 23:10 on 11/26/2018. And by then it was too late. Mr. Saunier had already died, right?
Yes.
Reads here, do you see optical density? You see the capital H there?
I do.
Capital H stands for high, right?
Yes.
That's outside the normal range.
That's correct. Excuse me. Yeah, that's correct.
All right, within normal limits, or normal would be 0.000 to 0.399. Do you see that?
I do.
Can you agree with that?
I'm not a laboratory person, so I'm just taking that for face value, honestly.
All right. Well, you've looked at these hit panels before, right?
Yes.
And you're just, I mean, depending on the lab, I mean, those values can be a little different, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Right.
And at the same time, the 0.000 to 0.399, that's within range of what you typically see.
Yes.
And if you look over on the left next to that H, it's got 3.501. You see that?
I do.
And the 000 to 0.399, the 0.399 is actually the highest or high normal, right?
Yes.
What you would expect to see is less than that.
Yes, for this lab that's running the test, that's correct.
And 3.501 is about 9 times 0.399, right?
I haven't done the math for that. We can get our calculators out and try
Sure.
it.
How about it?
We can do that. The iPhone can help us. .77 is what I get.
All right. So that's about 8.77 is about 9, right?
Yes, it is about 9.
And so by the time they get the first hit panel, before it comes back, he's dead, right?
Yes.
And his hit panel is 9 times the high normal limit, right?
Approximately, yes.
So when you testified earlier that he didn't have hit, what did you mean by that?
I don't recall saying that he didn't have HIT.
So Billy Saunier did have HIT, right?
He did have, by this number, he had a 3.5, but again, the confirmatory value with an SRA would be the most definitive way to say that he had HIT. But HIT also has multitude of other components to it, not just a platelet count that has gone down.
So Billy Saunier, when he was a patient at WellStar's Keystone Hospital, was suffering from heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, HIT.
Object to form, you can answer.
By this optical density test, he does have a high level, which was not confirmed by an SRA for obvious reasons.
I'm still, I'd like for you to answer the question. I'm happy either way you go. He either had HIT or he did not have HIT.
Well, he did have it by this optical test. He did not have HITT. He had HIT by this one test, which was not confirmed. But by this one test he did, which was not confirmed by an SRA.
Well, you can't confirm it because he's dead, right?
Well, I get that. But I also, this is somewhat of a gray fact because you didn't have a confirmatory test for obvious reasons that that he expired.
So without the confirmatory test, you would not testify that he was suffering from HIT, right?
From initial analysis, he does, but it is relatively common for us to get an SRA, which comes back negative. And so there are false positives within an optical density. For that reason, we do an SRA anytime we have a early confirmatory optical density.
Okay. And is it your testimony that the hit panel for Billy Saunier is a false positive?
I didn't say that it was a false positive. I said that there are false positives with an initial ELISA, heparin-induced and antibody test. I said commonly, or not commonly, when we have a positive optical density test, we confirm that with an SRA. That's what I said. I didn't say this was false positive. I said we want to rule out false positives because the treatment is an anticoagulant, which has a myriad of complications that can occur that I've personally dealt with over a 19-year period.
Yeah, I want to rule out now whether you're suggesting that Exhibit 6, the 3.501 with a capital H next to it, is a false positive. Is that your testimony?
I don't know that this is a false positive because we did not do an SRA.
Okay. So, but your testimony is it may be a false positive.
It may be a false positive because there was no SRA.
All right. And can you quantify how likely a 3.501 is a false positive?
It's unlikely that it's a false positive.
Have you ever had a false positive with a capital H next to it of 3.501?
I can't recall if I've had one that's a false positive that's that high. It's unlikely. It's less than a 10 to 20% chance, but I can't remember over all the patients that I've seen.
I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm just saying I can't recall over all these years if one that high, but it's usually less than 10 to 20% chance that it'll be a false positive.
And how many hit panels do you order in a month?
I don't know the number I order in a month.
Year?
Quite honestly, it depends on, because we have roughly 80 patients in our service, it depends on how many times I'm on call for the weekend. But for my own patients, I order 2 today. But I would say somewhere between 2 to 5 times a month.
Okay. So that's between 24 and 60 a year.
Yeah, for my practice. I'm not including, the hospital per se.
Yeah. And how many out of the 24 to 60, how many false positives do you see?
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
What's the last false positive you remember seeing? How long ago?
About a month and a half ago. And that patient's SRA came back negative, and we were able to stop the anticoagulation and send the patient home.
But you'd already started the anticoagulation, right?
Because his platelet count was in the 50,000, sorry, and well below the parameter of 100,000, and it was a greater than a 50% drop, which is the data that we use to call it that. Yes.
Greater than or equal to 50%.
I don't use greater than equal to. I use less than or greater than. I don't use equal to. So it was less than 50%. And that's what all the publications have denoted.
All the publications have denoted what?
Generally, for the publications that we use, is the publication also in the journal cardiovascular cardiology journals. It's less than 50%, not less than and equal to 50%. So I'm not sure which screen I'm looking at. So maybe I'll just look at the laptop. Is that easier for you guys?
Whatever one you want to look at. Yeah, the laptop's fine for me.
Okay, we'll do that, because I'm sorry if I keep looking up. I'm looking at the bigger screen, so that's why I apologize.
Do you want to turn off the bigger screen and do the laptop? It's up to you. I don't.
Yeah. Let me see. Make sure we have enough power on this. Do you want to juice this up?
Is it gonna look like?
Yeah, it's about 20%. So I don't want. We're gonna add some power to the laptop. I just see the battery a little bit coming down. Just give us a second while we do that. We don't want the power to go out on
Yeah, other
this.
side.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Okay,
Charging.
yeah, it's charging. Okay.
All right, I'm going to show you what has been previously marked as Exhibit 7 of your deposition.
Okay.
Porter. I think.
Should I click on this, you think? Or it's going to automatically come up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll open it up for you.
Okay. All right.
Show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 7. And these are Billy Saunier's platelet counts. Do you recall these?
I do.
Okay. On 14 November, it was 208. That's normal, right?
Every patient's normal is different, but this was his one for that day.
All right. And 185 is also within 150 to 400. You agree 150 to 400 is a normal?
If that's what the laboratory says, it's different for every patient. But yes.
And then you're aware that he had a surgery, a CABG, coronary artery bypass graft surgery, right?
Yes.
You call that an open heart surgery because you open the chest, right?
I do.
And his platelet count dropped to 136. Do you see that?
I do see that.
And 136 over 208 at 65%. which means he had a platelet drop of 35%, right?
Object to form.
I'm not sure I agree with the percentages because I don't use 208 as the baseline. But if that's what you have as your numbers, that math is correct. 136 over 208 is correct, but I'm not sure I agree with the 35% because that's not a baseline that I use.
So the baseline you used was 136, 185,
Yes.
but 136, right?
Yeah. I think I think it's controversial on 136 or over 185, but for surgeons, it's 136. It would be the baseline for us, absolutely.
All right. So on November 19th, as far as you're concerned, his platelet count had dropped 0.
It hasn't dropped 0. That's not what I said. I said that is a new baseline after open heart surgery.
Well, if it's 136, then it hasn't, if that's his baseline, it hasn't dropped at all.
It's the baseline after heart surgery, yes.
And then the next day it's 120, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And 120 over 208, so that's 58%.
Object to form, you can answer.
It's the math is, I can do the math and make sure, and I will.
Sure. I mean, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, sure. If I agree that that's 57.7%, that's, yeah, the math is correct.
And so using his baseline of 208, that would be a 42% drop in the platelet count, right?
If you use 208 as the baseline, but that's not what I'm saying that heart surgeons would use as the baseline because it's 136. So that math is correct, but I'm not sure the denominator is what is considered standard.
Okay. So you're
For
based on
cardiac surgery.
36, right?
I would base it on, yeah, so it'd be 120. And I'm happy to do the math. 120 over 36. I'm sorry, 120 divided by 136 is 88% minus 1. It's 11.8% drop.
Okay. And is it your understanding that Dr. Mayung was not in the hospital after he performed this surgery?
I don't know where Dr. Mayung was after he did the surgery.
You know this is a Thanksgiving holiday, right?
I did not recall that this is Thanksgiving holiday.
Let me pull it up.
Sorry, did you want me to pull it up or you pull it up?
No. I apologize.
Yeah.
No, I'm pulling it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The November
my calendar doesn't go back that far on my phone.
Well, surely one of that phone does, right?
Yeah. The Piedmont Microsoft Office calendar doesn't go back. It goes to 2020, man.
Oh, man. According to the calendar I'm looking at, we can make it an exhibit if you like. Thanksgiving in November of 2018 was on the 22nd, a Thursday.
Okay.
And do you have an understanding about whether Dr. Mayung was there after he performed the surgery on the 19th for the balance of that week?
I don't know the answer to that.
And since Dr. Mayung trained under you, you would have trained him as well that the baseline for Billy Saunier was 136, right?
I don't recall that he and I had a conversation about that. That was a long time ago.
Well, but I mean, if someone is working under your tutelage, you would want them to know how to determine whether their patient was suffering from heparin-induced thrombocytopenia or HIT. I mean, I think you wrote that you've got to be especially vigilant for HIT, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when the platelet count's less than 100,000, you have a greater than a 50% decrease. And just, as a clarification, why that occurs, that we do it after baseline or after surgery, I'm sorry, is that there's a massive amount of during cardiac surgery, a lot of fluid and shifts occur. For instance, a lot of fluid is given. That's why patients after heart surgery are sometimes on oxygen. Because we have to give the patient a lot of fluid in order to do that. And so you somewhat hemodilute the patient out. So that's one reason that you see a lot of shifting going on and especially blood counts, hemoglobins, hematocrits, platelet counts naturally go down. And the second reason that happens is that the blood is either washed through a machine or it's gone through cell saver, which in process of doing that, which is necessary to do the coronary bypass grafting, it does remove some of the platelets across the board. And so that's why we redo the baseline as day zero. We call it day zero in a lot of ways, the day of surgery. For instance, if a patient had a hemoglobin of 10 preoperatively, and their hemoglobin was 7 preoperatively, we wouldn't base it on 10. We would give them blood because their new hemoglobin with their new baseline is 7. So everything changes after surgery. For those who've had heart surgery and those who do heart surgery, that's pretty intuitive and is very common. So it's not out of any range that we don't treat patients what they had a day or 2 or 3 or 4 ago. You treat them from day zero as a new baseline.
Yeah. I just want to be real clear. So you determine your baseline in your patient after dosing heparin.
Objective form.
I'm not
answer.
Dosing heparin for what? What?
Well, I mean, he had heparin when he was in surgery.
Yeah, he did have heparin when in surgery, but what happens after heart surgery is after you do the procedure, when they get to the intensive care unit, you get a fresh set of labs. You get what we call a CBC, which has the hemoglobin, the hematocrit, the platelet count, and the white blood cell count. We also do a set of chemistries. So we know what their sodium is, their potassium, their creatinine.
I'm
So
just talking
well,
I'm talking about platelets.
I know that. I know, but I'm trying to explain to you why there's a baseline. And it's after heart surgery, so it's not after heparin. And after heparin, we give protamine to reverse that. So your statement of saying baseline's after heparin is actually not correct. I'm trying to, as an expert, trying to explain why this is the baseline. The baseline is after heart surgery, when they get to the intensive care unit, we draw a fresh set of labs. And by the way, that platelet count was 136. So that's where we start as determining the remaining platelets for the rest of the hospitalization. So I'm answering the question that you asked.
Yeah, and that's after your patient has already received heparin on that very day.
Later that evening, that's correct.
No. The patient is getting heparin when the patient's undergoing the heart surgery.
It is, and then we reverse the heparin with protamine.
And so after the patient's already received heparin, then you set the baseline, right? In this case, 136.
That's right.
All right. And can you cite for me any textbook, treatise, peer-reviewed article, non-peer-reviewed article, grand rounds, throwaways, anything in the history of medicine that you determine a baseline for a HIT test or HIT assay after the patient's already received heparin? Just cite for me just anything.
So there is
first,
no.
Can you cite it? I'd like some literature.
So I wish that in my practice in the art of medicine that I had a publication or a treatise or a peer-reviewed paper that allows us to practice across the board for everything that we do. So the answer is there is nothing that is a randomized trial that is peer-reviewed, published, except we have what we call consensus statements, and we have expert statements that allow us to dictate some aspects of the way we practice. And in a expert kind of in a very prominent, one of the most prominent journals that we have, and one of the most prominent comprehensive clinical reviews that we've ever had on heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, done by world-class physicians in the Mount Sinai Medical Center, published in the Journal of American College of Cardiology. There is a statement that regards that, that really becomes a new post-operative. Clinicians should use a new post-operative plate count as a baseline. And I know that you've seen this article in the past, and I absolutely agree with that. So that's why
What
we
article?
do that.
What article is this?
This is in the Salter et al. Article. It's on page 2520, second column, second paragraph. And importantly, I'll read it for the court.
Email it to me.
So you have this article. I mean, if I understand correctly, you have it. I don't need to email.
I don't have it. Email it to me, please.
James, you do have it. It's the article that Dr. Young brought to his deposition.
That's fine. This is a different deposition. I want a copy of the article he's looking at now.
We sent it to you earlier today.
Let me see if
We sent it to you.
we're able to open it.
I didn't email that one. It was the other one that we
Hang on.
But we can,
Hang on. Just give me a minute. I'll resend it.
All right.
I forwarded it to you directly and to Paul Reynolds and to Elizabeth,
Thank you.
directly from what Dr. Thourani sent me at 3:24 today.
Okay.
Oh, wait a second.
I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. It's not in there.
It's the annals paper that we sent.
It's not, I'm sorry, that's the wrong paper.
Yeah,
That's all right.
Yeah,
I don't, you've got it, James. I don't have it to give to you.
I don't have it.
Let me, I mean, I can try to go on my computer while we're sitting here, but let's go off the record for a minute.
All right.
We're off the record at 6:19 p.m.
So what did you just send me, Heather?
Back on the record at 6:27 p.m.
You mind reading back where we were?
Let me see if I can find it.
I think we were just talking about the article, but
You were,
Yeah, I think I said I was going to read out about why, where you asked where in print it says that, and I talked about.
You're talking about the Salter article?
I am, second paragraph, sorry, it's page 2520, second column, second paragraph, the paragraph starting with frequently and ending with importantly.
Yep.
Yeah. Good.
And we'll make this exhibit. Hold on, let me put it in the chat. Or do you want to put it in the chat? Well, hold on, I'll do it.
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
Well, I need to put it in there so that court adds it to the
Got it.
I think we got stop share for a second. All right, is this 8, Madam Court Reporter?
Yes, we are on number 8.
Got it. So 8's the Salter article. And we're on page 2520, paragraph begins frequently. Take it away.
Yeah, so importantly, clinicians should use the new post-operative plate count as a baseline. And that is, that's the very last sentence. And that is corresponds with the care that we've had since I was at Emory University, since I was at MedStar, MedStar in Washington, D.C. And it's also the same as we have here at Piedmont Healthcare.
After administering the heparin, right?
Post-operative means yes, because post-operative means that you gave heparin and then you gave protamine to reverse the heparin.
Was that all you wanted to share from this article?
Yes. You asked where it was in print, and I'm just showing where it was in print.
Okay. We'll come back to that. I'm going to go back to Exhibit 6. You see that? So,
Yes, sir.
I apologize. Say again, please.
No, you're asking if I could see that, and I said, yes, I could.
Yeah. So these are, well, we disagree on the baseline. Using the 208 as a baseline, you agree with the numbers? That we've got platelet drops of, I mean, on the 19th of 35%, 20th 42%, 21 34%, 22 27%, 23 32%, 24 45%, and 25 50%.
Checked form.
No, I
Go
don't.
ahead.
I don't agree with those percentages. No. I agree with that. The math is correct. 136 over 208, 65%, and 35% drop. But I don't agree with the rationale about why 208 is the denominator. We just went through the article and what's also clinical practice, and it appears to be at least 3 medical centers, and including WellStar, 4 medical centers.
Okay.
Is it, Heather, is it appropriate if I make a comment on the previous
Sure.
line of questioning? Yeah. So just, when I did the math, honestly, using 136 as the surgery baseline, which is POSE 0, that obviously is something that we do. On the plate count of 104 over 136 is a 23% drop, not even 30%. And obviously that 104 is the lowest for all the values that you have, and that's a 23% drop using 136 as a baseline. Even if you were to use 185, which I don't agree with, but if you were to use that, it's still only a 43% drop. So nowhere do we really see a 50% drop across the board over the ensuing 6 days, unless you use 208, which is not a true baseline after heart surgery. So I just want to make that comment as an expert for this.
All right. I'm going to show you what has been previously marked as Exhibit 8. And also, you don't agree that that Mr. Saunier was suffering from HIT, right?
I never said that he wasn't suffering from HIT. I said that his OD, which was read positive, was a preliminary OD, which was positive, but was not substantiated with a more definitive SRA testing. That's what I said.
And how do you explain a HIT panel of 3.501, 9 times higher than the high normal? And that, you know, the testing that you and your colleagues here in Atlanta using that baseline, you know, he wasn't suffering from HIT at all.
Didn't say that. And I have to be honest with you, you know, with a platelet count of
Always be honest with me. You're under oath.
Yes. Good point. The platelet count of 23% dropped for me at 104. If this patient were a part of the study that we were discussing earlier, would never have gotten a HIT testing. It was not below 100,000. It never dropped below 50%. And so this patient would have, in our, based on the study that we talked about earlier with the current practice, would not have gotten it, would not even gotten an HIT test. The patient was absolutely clinically stable and did not have the other thing that we talk about, which is HITT, which has any level of thrombosis or any other component. I know you have it up on your screen here, had no component of that, was doing otherwise extremely well. And so for us, I don't think this patient would have gotten a test. And, you know, because it didn't fall into most of the criteria that we're talking about. And so for me, it's you know, a positive OD came back, but in a lot of places, in most places, we would not have even gotten the HIT test. So, you know, just based on clinical stuff, and of course, in the article that we published that we talked about is clinical manifestations are more important than just a platelet count drop. And in this case, the platelet count drop did not even reach, it reached 23% and not below 100,000. So I think there's a lot of things to discuss about whether this is HIT versus not HIT and whether this test should have even been done. And quite honestly, I applaud Myung's team at WellStar for drawing it and quite honestly doing that over and above the standard of care, quite honestly, because the standard of care would have not necessarily called for this to be drawn. So I want to make that comment because I think that's very important.
So your testimony is it was just a bad day for Billy Saunier. There was nothing done. Please don't interrupt me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. You know, despite the capital H and the 3.501 and the heparin, that there was nothing anybody could have done. He was just going to die.
It's my testimony that unfortunately in cardiac surgery over 19 years of practicing and 3 years as a fellow, so now 22 years in practice, it is unfortunate that anybody dies under medical care. There is nobody who hates this more than the physician themselves, okay? Because that's what we took the Hippocratic Oath for, is to save people's lives. I'm always devastated when a patient dies. More than anybody else on the team, it's me that really takes the burden on themselves. So that's not fair to say that he's just, oh yeah, it's just another lackadaisical thing that somebody died. Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that they're in cardiac surgery. Unfortunately, why is it a high skill set, high type of acuity type of procedure? Because what we do, people do die, unfortunately. In fact, graft closures, which is where I think happened for this patient, is that I think the patient's graft closed. And I can tell you in the last 2 weeks, I know of 3 heart surgery patients where the grafts have closed. And none of them had hit. None of them had a platelet count less than 100,000. None of them had a drop of less than 50%. We did not draw the HIT. And so there are other things in cardiac surgery, unfortunately, while people die. As sad as it is, it happens with the best of intentions and it happens with the best care possible. And it's not, your comment made it lackadaisical that he was just going to die and nobody cared. And I think that's not a fair statement, honestly.
You prescribe heparin?
Yes, I'm a heart surgeon, so I have to prescribe it.
You order it, right?
I don't physically put in orders. No, my team puts in orders, but I do not physically put in orders.
Well, you don't have to physically put in an order to order a drug be administered to a patient, right?
Right, but you ask if I prescribe it, but I don't, there's a distinction between asking someone to do it versus actually doing it yourself. So I want to make that clarification.
It's called a verbal order, right?
It is called a verbal order. You're right.
So to order a drug like heparin, you've got to know what it treats, right?
Yes.
You got to know how it works.
Yes.
Whether there are any, what the adverse reactions to that drug are.
Yes.
And you know, how to care for that patient if that patient suffers from adverse reactions.
Yes.
And so you ordered heparin, and that's a drip, right?
It's not a drip. It can be a bolus or a drip. So there are two different ways to do it. And the third way is subcutaneously. So 3 ways to do it.
Well, either way you do it, have you ever heard of an anti-XA assay?
I have heard of that, but I don't know much about it.
You don't know what it is?
I can't recall exactly.
Do you understand? Another thing you've got to know when you order a drug is the therapeutic range, right?
Yes.
And if a patient's outside of therapeutic range, whoever's administering those drugs needs to act accordingly, right?
Generically as a comment, yes.
Generically as a comment, if you're overdosing a patient, you need to bring the drugs, you need to stop the drug, right?
Object to form.
The answer.
I don't understand how you overdose heparin. Honestly, I don't know if you're talking about every drug or if you're just talking about heparin, because I'm confused that, is it morphine or is it heparin? Because there's a big distinction between the two as far as overdosing drugs.
Whether you are prescribing morphine or heparin, you've got to know what the therapeutic range of the drug is, right?
Yes, you do.
And
Quite honestly, in consultation with the pharmacist, because that's why I'm saying a generic comment about drugs, it's an unfair statement. And it's not 1,000% appropriate, because there are a lot of different ways that a drug can be therapeutic, but if a patient has renal failure or liver failure, it's not appropriate for that medication. So we have pharmacists who help us understand the nuances, because it's impossible for a physician, any one person, to know the thousands of drugs that they give and every single component of therapeutic levels of it.
what is the therapeutic range for heparin?
I don't know the answer for that. For a ACT is what we commonly measure during surgery. We want that to be over 400 before we go on the heart-lung machine, and over 250 before we do other cardiac procedures. That's why I'm saying it's a little bit different and it can't be used generically.
Are you aware of a policy at Keystone WellStar Hospital to perform a heparin anti-XA assay on at least a daily basis?
No, I'm not.
Object to form.
I don't. Sorry,
ahead.
did you want me to answer that? Okay.
Yeah, you can answer.
Yeah, I know. I thought you were going to ask another question. So no, I don't know that policy. I have heard of some sites who use that instead of ACT they use heparin levels, but that's not been my practice at the 3 institutions that I've worked at.
And are you aware of any way other than a heparin anti-XA assay to determine whether a patient is getting a dose of, whether that patient is above the therapeutic range or below the therapeutic range?
Yes, it's called an ACT. That's what we use in the operating room during cardiac surgery.
And can you tell me why in Billy Saunier's case, there was no heparin anti-XA assay done from the time of his surgery to the time of his death to determine whether he was within the therapeutic range for heparin?
Now, like I said, we're just doing that during the procedure. We use ACT commonly at our institutions, and not that. And that ACT is what we're above that certain level is when we know that we're fully anticoagulated. Like I also said, protamine is administered at the end of the case to counteract the heparin, to have the heparin, not be there anymore. And we do a repeat ACT to make sure that the levels are appropriate. And so usually 2 to 3 ACTs are done during surgery. You do not do that necessarily post-operatively across the board. More or less, moreover, the heparin sub-Q that was given, it has no measurement, and we don't measure ACTs. That does not require any type of level checking to do for a sub-Q heparin. So it's somewhat irrelevant unless you're giving the patient a heparin drip, which this patient necessarily wasn't on post-operatively.
Well, show me, and by ACT, you're talking about an activated clotting time, is that right?
Yes.
And show me a single ACT test performed post-operatively. Have you ever performed one post-operatively?
Yeah, I don't personally perform. Our perfusionists perform those, but I don't personally run the test.
Okay. So show me in the medical record where a single ACT test was done between Mr. Saunier's surgery and his death.
Like I said, it was probably done during the time of surgery, but you don't do it afterwards. There's no reason to do it afterwards. Right. You're not getting intravenous. You're not, like I've said, you do the ACTs during surgery. So you do them, then you're done with them. You don't keep doing them unless you're on a heparin drip or you're trying to do repeat surgery on someone. You don't do them. So why would there be one? There shouldn't be one. I'd be surprised if there was one.
So your testimony is that when you order heparin, and we're talking about post-operatively, after surgery, then yes, you do not expect anyone in the hospital to determine whether that patient is above or below the therapeutic range.
No, I think you have to clarify what you're saying and not be generic about it. Heparin can be performed in 3 different ways. We've talked about the bolus that you get intravenously to actually do the procedure. There, you use the ACT during that time period, November 19th. Some people use heparin assays. It's the most patients use ACT. Physicians use ACT. If you are on a heparin drip, i.e. intravenous pump, then you would have some measure of heparin that's usually done, and that is done by the laboratories, but commonly not ACT. If you're giving heparin sub-Q,
how did Billy Saunier get heparin post-operatively?
I was trying to say that, but I'm sorry, but I was trying to.
You cut him off.
I was trying to finish my sentence. So, in heparin sub-Q, that millions of patients get after heart surgery and other surgeries, there is no monitoring. It is a dose that's given, a weight-based dose that's given subcutaneously, and you don't need to do an ACT or a heparin assay to do that because it's not intravenous management and you're not tweaking it. It's just a single dose, or I'm sorry, usually twice a day dose given sub-Q. That is usually kilogram based.
Is that, so your testimony is there's no testing required because the heparin is administered subcutaneously? Is that right?
That's correct. A lot of these, I'll just make, if you don't mind, I'll make a lot of patients are on home heparin sub-Q. And so, therefore they're not, when you're at home, you're not measuring it, and so there's no necessarily reason to do that at that point for that. Obviously millions of people are on it at home and they're not measuring it because they're at home, not in a hospital.
Well, but hospitalized patients, you treat them differently, right?
But not the sorry.
You can answer.
The heparin sub-Q it doesn't matter if you're in the hospital or not in the hospital, you still don't measure
it. Billy Saunier got heparin every 8 hours. You aware of that? I mean, that's per your order, right?
I'm sorry, it's not my order, obviously, but I can't recall exactly what the dosing it was for him. It was every 8 hours or 12 hours.
Well, and that's how you would typically dose it, right?
Either every 8 hours or every 12 hours, one of the two.
All right. And can you point me to is there a policy where you're not at WellStar, you're at Piedmont? That's
correct.
And there is no policy there that requires monitoring of heparin after surgery, right?
No, let me reframe that, because you're saying after surgery. If the patient is for whatever reason on intravenous heparin through a drip, it is monitored. If it is subcutaneous heparin, it is not monitored.
Okay.
We have a lot of patients on intravenous heparin after surgery for a variety of reasons, and it is monitored there because we want to stay within a certain range.
And it's monitored by an anti-XA assay.
Yeah, by a laboratory value, right?
And I think your testimony is because it's subcutaneous heparin and the patient's in the hospital, there is no monitoring and no need for an anti-XA test, right?
Yes, and I don't think a hospital have anything to do with it. I think it's just the idea that you're not monitoring it because it's sub-Q heparin.
Okay. So back to, I think this is Exhibit A, is that right?
Are you asking me? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
We're on Exhibit 9, and you had indicated this was previously marked as Exhibit 8 elsewhere.
So this is 9, is that
Yes.
right? Thank
Yeah.
you. I'll show you what's been marked as Exhibit 9. Do you know what a 4T score is?
Yes, sir.
And a 4T score, the 4T, it stands for thrombocytopenia, that's one T. Timing, that's another T. Thrombosis, that's another T. And alternative cause, the possibility of that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know why the alternative cause, is that also a T because of the T in alternative?
Yeah, it must be.
Okay. So thrombocytopenia, if the platelet count falls greater than or equal to 50%, that's 2 points, right?
Checked form.
Yes, sir. Yeah, which we have highlighted in red.
Right. And if the platelets drop, and that occurs within 5 to 10 days after commencement of the treatment, in this case, the 19th, when Billy Saunier got heparin during his surgery, then that's also 2 points, right?
If that's what that's what you have in red. If it did that.
I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
And thrombosis, and what is thrombosis?
Thrombosis is when a blood vessel clots off.
All right. And Did you review Mr. Saunier's medical record? Did you see systemic issues of thrombosis?
I did not. I'm sorry. I did review it. I did not see the thrombosis part. How about that?
Did you read Mr. Saunier's son or daughter's deposition?
What was their names again?
I don't remember the first name. Hold on, I'll tell you.
Kathleene Saunier, right?
That was the wife.
I want to just make sure we're not on mute or anything.
No, he's searching
Okay,
for
okay,
his,
okay.
the names of
I'm
his
looking for
clients.
the depositions.
Okay, sorry. When I hear silence on Zoom, you never know.
What's that?
So when you're on Zoom, you never know if
Yeah, that's true.
it does. I've been on enough calls where I didn't know what was going on. This is being pulled up.
He's showing you testimony.
So the son's name is Brian Saunier.
Okay.
The daughter's name is Michelle.
Let me see. I don't.
Sure.
We did not send those.
Yeah, I did not review those. No, sir.
Okay.
Just Kathy Saunier is the only one that I saw, sir.
Got it. All right, back to Exhibit 9. Do you agree that bruising and bleeding at a surgical site can be signs of thrombosis?
No, not necessarily. We see bruising when we close a sternotomy incision in the skin all the time, and that's not thrombosis. That's just from the incision and opening the skin up. You can see that bruising. So it's not at all is that indicative of thrombosis.
You said not necessarily. I mean, after you perform a surgery, do patients develop bruises the size of basketballs?
In the chest, or it's uncommon to have that.
Okay. And that could be a sign or symptom of thrombosis, right?
No, not necessarily is it thrombosis. It could be from bleeding.
Yeah, but it can also be a sign or symptom of thrombosis.
Object to form.
I'm not sure that you would see anything that's the size of a basketball is pretty big. And so usually that occurs from bleeding. Thrombosis would usually that area turns black, or if it's lack of blood flow, so it dies. It doesn't necessarily grow in size. Generally speaking, that's from bleeding or other things that can happen, but I'm not sure thrombosis makes sense as far as anything that's basketball size anywhere in the body.
Okay. So your testimony is that is not a potential sign or symptom of thrombosis, right?
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I thought you were done.
That's all right. No, I was not.
Yeah, no, I do not think that's a sign of thrombosis.
Okay. And bleeding at the surgical site, also not a sign or not a potential sign or symptom of thrombosis?
Bleeding at the surgical site, is that what you said?
Yes.
No, bleeding is at the surgical site is definitely not a sign of thrombosis. That's bleeding.
And, go ahead.
No, I just said that's not thrombosis. It's bleeding. Bleeding at the surgical site is bleeding, not thrombosis.
And rashes or purpura, I mean, those aren't signs or symptoms of thrombosis either, right?
Rashes generally are not. Purpura generally, it depends on the purpura. If it's around the incision site, generally no, it's not. That's just a reaction of having your skin cut. Thrombosis, what we're really talking about is, and I've seen this, unfortunately, you know, your toe becomes black. And so you have lost blood flow to something, and it is, you know, in a decay mode after it becomes thrombosis. I've seen it happen in fingers. I've seen it happen thrombosis to the blood vessels to the brain, so you have a stroke. I've seen, you know, a variety of that type of stuff, which is obviously potentially is sometimes how you find HIT from the beginning is thrombosis, and that's something we saw commonly and obviously have published on as we mentioned earlier.
And you agree that a physician caring for a post-operative patient like Billy Saunier has to be especially vigilant for signs and symptoms of thrombosis, right?
Yes.
Same for other possible causes for Billy Saunier's hit.
Well, I think you'd be looking out for all the complications that can occur with cardiac surgery, since he had cardiac surgery. And quite honestly, when you mentioned the word vigilant, I think this team was overzealous and over vigilant in getting tests and being reactive when the standard of care doesn't necessarily at this point require them to be that vigilant. So I would say they were over vigilant in taking care of Mr. Saunier and went over and beyond the standard of care, and where most people would have waited 50% or have waited for the platelet count to get below 100,000. They didn't. They said, we want to be proactive. Now, honestly, I have to commend them for it. So I think that they were looking for all the signs more so than most teams do, honestly. Again, I shouldn't use the word honestly because it's all honest.
That's okay. No one in Billy Saunier's case, no one's care fell below the standard of care, right?
No, it did not fall below the standard of care.
All right. And unfortunately, post-operatively, he died of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. It was just unfortunate.
I didn't say that he had died from a heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. I believe that he actually died from his graft going down. I think that he fibrillated and died from his graft going down, which unfortunately happens. In fact, I told you, I know of 3 cases in the last 2 weeks where grafts have gone down. And so I think that's what happened to him, is his graft went down and he fibrillated and unfortunately was unable to be recovered.
Just things happen, right?
Objective form.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say things happen. And I had a personal discourse in about an hour ago where I said that's not taken lightly by anybody who operates on anybody. And it is, quite honestly, shouldn't be very flippant about things happen. That's not what I said. That's not how cardiac surgeons are. And I specifically know that that's not how this team is.
What you're saying, though, it's not preventable. His graft just went down.
It's not preventable. The last 3 patients that I saw in 2 weeks was not preventable.
I'm talking about Billy Saunier.
I'm talking about Billy Saunders and all the other cardiac surgeries where there's a complication. And that's why cardiac surgery has a higher complication rate, because of the nature of the diseases that we're dealing with.
This is Exhibit 10. I'm not going to go through this with you. The CV that you provided us, that's got all your education, training, and experience, right?
I think I sent one earlier today. So things have changed over the last 5 years. So
It was produced.
yeah, great. And so we did send one. It's about 11 months old, but it is more recent.
You agree that heparin-induced thrombocytopenia is a serious complication arising from heparin therapy?
Yes.
That
Right. I'd like to clarify that it's the antibodies to the heparin therapy, not actually heparin itself, right?
well, the patient is not going to get heparin-induced thrombocytopenia without being administered heparin, right?
Correct. Yes, correct.
You agree that HIT is characterized by a decrease in platelet count?
Objective form. You can answer.
It is by a threshold of less than 50% or a platelet count in our sake that we use for our publication less than 100,000, but at least 50% drop. So any platelet count drop is not associated with this HIT.
Right. My question was a little different though. HIT is characterized by a drop in platelet count, right?
Object form.
It is a manifestation of HIT.
And whether you diagnose heparin-induced thrombocytopenia or HIT is determined by the amount of that drop, the percentage of that drop, right?
The magnitude of it, yes, that's correct. In addition to the other, in addition to the other clinical manifestations that go with it. Yes.
Right. Do you agree that heparin-induced thrombocytopenia increases the risk of thrombosis?
Yes.
And HIT, if I say HIT instead of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, same thing, right?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. HIT is caused by an immune response to heparin.
It is.
The immune response to heparin leads to the formation of antibodies,
Yes.
and those antibodies activate platelets.
It actually, yeah, yes. It's complex, but overall, the overall theme is that, yes.
Platelet activation and HIT can result in the formation of blood clots.
It can.
And platelet activation and HIT can enlarge existing blood clots.
Say that last sentence again, I'm sorry.
Sure, can enlarge it. In addition to creating new blood clots, it can also enlarge existing blood clots.
It could.
Heparin-induced HIT is a well-recognized complication of heparin therapy.
Yeah, I think we've covered that. Yeah.
It's an adverse effect or reaction, right?
Yes.
You agree it is standard practice to initiate a non-heparin anticoagulant when HIT is suspected?
No, I don't think it's a standard of when it's suspected.
Well, what is the standard?
The standard is that if you have,
Hold on, but you can suspect HIT and still not administer an anticoagulant, right?
Object form. Go ahead.
Objective form.
yeah, if you have a greater than a 50% a drop in the heparin count, if you have thrombosis that occurs systemically, then it is potentially thought of to starting that before you get to HIT assay. But with the lack of greater than 50%, not greater than equal, but greater than 50% from the baseline after cardiac surgery, and potentially other clinical manifestations, you would consider that depending on the risk associated with starting an anticoagulation. And after heart surgery, unfortunately, I've seen this way too much over the last 19 years. Bleeding after cardiac surgery causes a second surgery, a second sternotomy, reopening the patient up. And so it's not trivial, and it's weighed on very heavy on when to start anticoagulation for these patients.
Let me show you well, first of all, you said a drop in the heparin count. You meant platelet count, right?
I meant to say platelet. Did I say heparin? I apologize. I meant to say platelet count. I apologize.
And
Yep.
I think you also testified, you said 50%, not greater than 50%?
No, greater than 50. I said not greater and equal to. I said greater than 50%.
So if it's equal to 50%, that's not indicative of HIT, right?
Well, if you're talking about the baseline post-operatively for this patient specifically, we're talking about if the platelet count had been, yeah, I'll tell you. If the platelet count had been 68,000, then I think that would have been a different story, which is 136,000 divided by 2. I think that's a different story across the board. And that patient should have had testing and potentially argatroban or a way to treat HIT initiated before you get to that point. And so at this point, looking at this specific case, if you use the 136, you use the 185 after the heart cath, the heparin after that, neither one of those fall within that category.
You said greater than, not greater than or equal to, is that right? In other words, even if the number were 104 over 208, that's not good enough because it's not greater than 50%, right?
If you go by the exact
Form.
numbers,
Go
that's
ahead.
correct. Yeah, by these actual numbers, that is correct. And it's not below 100,000. In our case, we would not have tested this patient for an HIT test. He didn't fall within the parameters that most, that is written and published, quite honestly.
So what's been previously marked as Exhibit 11?
May I interrupt for just one moment, please? I
Sure.
hear someone objecting, but I can't see who that is, and I don't know their voice, so I need to know who's objecting besides Miss.
If ever it's a male objection, it's Paul Reynolds is who it is. I'm the only other person in the deposition.
Sure, thank you very much.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's quite all right. This is a policy. Did you review this policy?
I don't recall reviewing this policy. It's a continuous IV heparin therapy.
Right. And why do you think we were provided with a continuous IV heparin therapy procedure policy in this case?
Objective form calls for speculation. You can answer.
I don't know.
Do you see heparin-induced thrombocytopenia? That's HIT, right?
Yes.
That's the definition of HIT in this WellStar policy. With or without thrombosis. It's marked by a, I don't know if you can see that okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so you went to, you had math in high school, right? And middle school and even before then?
I
Right?
think you know the answer to that. Yeah.
And do you see this? Is that big? Can you see that all right?
Yeah, I can see it.
And this is in the WellStar policy that we were provided. And do you see that greater sign and that line underneath it? You see that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do see it.
And that means greater than or equal to, right?
It does.
Yeah. So when you said it had to be greater, not greater than or equal to, right? That's a little different from this WellStar policy, right?
Objective form.
I didn't come up with this. I didn't come up to this WellStar policy, and quite honestly, I'll just finish. If that's okay.
Yeah, finish your answer. You're always entitled to finish your answer.
And I don't know where they received that. I don't know where they got that from. And when you look at the baseline of 136, it's not even close to 50% or greater than or equal to 50%. So
yeah,
in my mind, somewhat irrelevant.
When you look at the number before he was administered heparin, which I'm calling a baseline, 104 over 208 is greater than or equal to 50%, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. 104 divided by 208 is 50%. And I think that the administration of heparin, if you were to look at the cath on the 14th, I'm sorry, on the 15th of November, if you even use, or being very liberal with the numbers, it's 185, which is still 43%, 104 divided by 185. Again, I did have math for a while, and so it's 43%. Actually did really well in math. And if you did the 136, it's 23%. Because we are talking about cardiac surgery. We're not talking about a generic person off the street who didn't have heart surgery. And so if you did not have heart surgery, I think it'd be great to use 208. But if you have heart surgery and you've drained the blood, you give it hemodilution, you're expecting a drop in the platelet count, that's where the baseline should be.
And you gave me the article, the Stetler article?
Yes, I think you've gotten that, yes, from the two previous deposition and now this one too.
I think you testified, you said 30%. I mean, that would still be an issue, right?
In what way would that be an issue?
Well, in the way that if we're looking at the 4 Ts, you still, when you're considering whether a patient is suffering from HIT and there's a fall of 30 to 50%, you still consider that, right?
That would be a 1 point. That's correct.
Correct.
If you use the surgery baseline of 23%, that would be 0 points. If you were being unbelievably liberal and use the 185 because the patient did have heparin on the 15th, you would be at 43%. So it'd be 0 to 1 point. I'm sorry, this is really blown up. Maybe you could, if you don't mind, maybe making that smaller.
This is the same Exhibit 9, I think it is.
Yeah, perfect. So I would say that would be a 0 or 1. So that'd be nice to highlight that in red.
Oh, you want me to highlight it for you?
Yeah, that'd be great. The 2 points and the greater than 50 just kind of stick out. So that's why I wanted to.
No, so you still disagree with this number?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I disagree with that because when you look at 185 and 136, again, I want to make an explanation of why cardiac surgery baseline is day 0, which is after the heart surgery, because of the multiple perturbations that occur during cardiac surgery. Automatically have a reason for the platelet to drop. And so because of that, we want to do that. Just like if a hemoglobin drops, we want to use the new hemoglobin. If I use the baseline hemoglobin of 10, this is a really important example. If I used a hemoglobin, a blood count of 10, but after surgery, it's a 5, based on the 10, I wouldn't transfuse the patient. Based on a 5 of a hemoglobin, I would transfuse the patient. So you've got to use the new labs after heart surgery as a point of treatment and a point of reference. And that's extremely important in this case, but it's also important in just clinical management. And that, to me, is a very important distinction that needs to be clarified.
Have you had a patient where the blood clotted off his bypass graft?
Me personally?
Yes.
Yes, I have.
Okay. About how many times has that happened?
Over 19 years, I can't give you an exact number. I would say less than 5 times, and I'm talking about acutely. It's common. No, I shouldn't say common. I would say that up to 5 to 10 years, your graft can close down somewhere around 20 to 30% if it's a vein graft. A less than 5% chance if it's an internal mammary graft. So there's I think, again, not using generic statements. I think you have to be a little more specific. Acutely, it's less than a 2% to 2% chance. Again, can't give you exact percentages for me or the country, but it's more rare for it to happen for grafts closing. However, like I also mentioned, Has happened 3 times in the last 2 weeks, patients that I've had to take care of afterwards. Not mine, but other surgeons that I've now had to deal with.
You agree that if a patient's bypass graft is clotted off, that patient can die?
Yes, absolutely.
And you agree that, go ahead,
and it takes heroics to get them back. And it sometimes works, but a lot of times it doesn't. If it happens acutely, it's one of our biggest disappointments, personal disappointments as a cardiac surgeon.
And HIT can cause new blood clots?
It can cause new blood clots. It generally just doesn't go to one space. When it goes, blood, just as a reminder, blood circulating all over your body. So when the antibodies and the platelets, they're not just going to one area. Blood's not just going to one area. When there's an antibody or a HIT antibody produced, it's going to the entire body. And so it's a systemic process, not a local process. And I think that's the best way to describe that. It's not contact dermatitis. It's an allergic reaction for the whole body. So it doesn't just go to one area. It attacks all the blood vessels, and especially the small ones, specifically small blood vessels where it usually goes first.
Of course, it's systemic. And you agree that the bypass graft is part of the body?
Well, of course, yeah, it's part of the body.
Part of the whole body when
it is.
When things begin.
No, you go.
Right?
Yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
That's all right.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's part of the body. Yeah.
You agree a delay in initiating treatment can affect patient outcomes that are suffering from HIT?
A delay can, and we're going with the definition that HIT was greater than a 50% reduction and or a platelet count less than 100,000, but the definition has been met. And especially in those patients who have since you mentioned, the clinical score of greater than 4, it's more likely.
Greater than. But this patient had a 4.501 on the HIT panel, the HIT assay, right?
No, I don't think that's correct.
Let's just pull it up.
3.5.
It was 3 something, I think. It wasn't in the 4 range.
3.501.
Okay. 3.501. Right?
Yes, sir. That's what I recollect.
Which is indicative of HIT, right?
Which is a preliminary indication of HIT, but not substantiated by a more definitive SRA, which would be the standard of care to draw out again. If the patient had not deceased, it would be the next step that would have ensued.
I don't remember the number of this exhibit, Madam Court Reporter. This is the HIT panel. I mean, you see here, according to this lab, it doesn't say anything about preliminary. It reads heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, HIT antibody present. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see it really magnified. And nothing says preliminary
like that now, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I can see it. I can see it better now. It's not so magnified.
Okay.
So yes, this is a positive ELISA test that generally is always confirmed with a SRA, like we discussed when we saw the document, earlier today.
But because he's dead, you can't confirm it. And are you saying that it's unlikely that he was suffering from HIT, notwithstanding this H 3.501?
No, I'm saying that this OD is positive for a ELISA test. I didn't say prelim. I said this is for the ELISA test. I said that a positive ELISA test triggers an SRA test to make sure that the ELISA test was correct. The ELISA test comes back much faster. The SRA takes more time to come back. So at least you would have an opportunity if the clinical situation deemed it necessary that you would do something for this. I will also go again on record for saying that this patient in our hands and in most surgeons' hands would not have gotten a HIT test because they did not have a 50% drop. Even yourself, we're talking about that it would be in a 30 to 50% range of thrombocytopenia, and it did not have any clinical manifestations of thrombosis and did have definite other causes of thrombocytopenia. So it's the fortuitous vigilance of the team that they actually even acted on this, because by the scores, they didn't need to.
Well, you said they were over vigilant, right? The team here?
Yes.
Well, what
I
are
do
these
agree with
wrong? Either the 3.501 is wrong or the clinical assessment is wrong. They can't both be right. This says he's, 9 times high normal. He's got HIT. And you're saying the clinical assessment rightly said he didn't have HIT. That's your testimony, right?
Judge form argumentative. Go ahead.
It's my testimony that the graft closure is the reason that I think he died that night. A positive OD does indicate the ELISA test for HIT, which was not unfortunately substantiated. But the reason I think he died that night was because his graft closed, unfortunately, leading to a mortality.
And you agree that a graft can be closed off by a blood clot, right?
Judge form asked and answered. Go ahead.
A blood clot by a graft closing is in some ways definition of a blood clot. That's what that is, a graft close. You had a graft that hasn't closed off. And again, like I said earlier, I've seen 3 grafts close. Grafts closed for a lot of different reasons. The 3 patients that I'm talking about in the last 2 weeks, none of them had HIT. So the point of it is that there are a variety and myriad of reasons why grafts close. And that's something that we as cardiac surgeons as a field struggle with, but it's not without us, wanting to investigate why that happens. And unfortunately, with his graft closing, they weren't able to really figure out the details of exactly what happened.
His graft closed because there was a clot, right?
Yes.
Okay. And your testimony is his graft closed as a result of a clot, and that's what killed him. But that clot that closed off the graft was not caused by a heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, right?
That's right.
And what we're looking at right now, the 3.501 with a big H next to it, indicates this patient was suffering from HIT, heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, right?
The H is next to the 3.501. That is correct. If an SRA was done and that was positive, I would tell you that that's a definitive reason for doing that. But you don't have an SRA, and there isn't one. So the definitive portion of it kind of goes away, and again, the graft closed. But I would also say that with an OD that high, the chance of having systemic thrombosis and clinical manifestations really grabs on. And the patient on autopsy and on clinical manifestations did not show that. And that is until you have positive SRAs and other manifestations, I don't think that you can say that this patient died from HIT. This patient died from a graft closing, fibrillating, and unfortunately unable to be resuscitated.
Well, the graft closing can be from a clot that's secondary to the HIT, which his HIT panel showed he had.
It also, at that level of an OD, you should have seen in an autopsy some other components, small thrombosis, something, and you did not. And so I don't think you can make that conclusion. I don't think that that's a valid conclusion. And on top of that, I would say that I don't see anywhere here that the standard of care was violated.
And so what you said was caused the clot, nobody knows. He just, the bypass graft clotted off and closed. You don't know why, right?
It can be technical. It can be the runoff. It can be the coronary artery disease that you have. There's a variety. Atherosclerosis within the aorta, the flow within it, the kinking of a graft. There's dozens of things that you can think about of why a graft closes. The patients that I talked about, the 3 patients who don't have HIT had their graft closed. They closed for some reason. They didn't have HIT. So there are reasons why this happens.
And your 3 patients did not, the bypass graft did not clot and close.
They did clot. That's what I'm trying to tell you, is that they weren't my patients, by the way. Okay. But the point of it is I'm having to deal with them, but none of them have HIT. And I'll never tell you why they clot, because none of us can go inside of a blood vessel and see why it clotted. We don't have that capacity and engineering wherewithals to know exactly why it clotted. But we deal with the consequences of it. And majority of time, we can get away with saving someone. In this unfortunate situation, you cannot. Just the last thought that came to me is, if the HIT is not going to just go find one graft and go attack it, it's going to have at that level of an OD, because like you mentioned, 8.77 fold higher, it's going to attack other blood vessels. It's going to really have some grab hold into other smaller blood vessels or any blood vessel really having that problem. That was not the case here. It was not the case.
You could have a patient with arteriosclerosis, right? And they could be attacking, I mean, it wouldn't just be a coronary artery that it would be attacking, right?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Arteriosclerosis and coronary artery. Arteriosclerosis is a hardening of the arteries. Yeah, that's hardening of the arteries. I'm not sure how that relates to this necessarily.
You're saying arteriosclerosis cannot cause a coronary artery dysfunction?
No, it can. There's arteriosclerosis and there's atherosclerosis, 2 different things. And I think the first time you said arteriosclerosis, second time you said atherosclerosis. So I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
Yeah. While that's a systemic condition, if the coronary artery is adversely impacted, it can kill a patient, even though it's not harming a patient in other areas of the body, right?
Well, yeah, that's called a heart attack.
Yeah,
it's called a heart.
It kills people. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's a heart attack. Yeah.
And that, I mean, the coronary artery, that's the vessel that supplies blood to the heart itself, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and if the heart doesn't get oxygenated blood, it stops. And the rest of the body then doesn't get oxygenated blood, and that patient dies, right?
That is the purpose of the coronary bypass grafting that Dr. Myung did.
The answer is yes, right? Would you read back my question, please, Madam Court Reporter?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed the question.
If the heart doesn't get oxygenated blood, it stops. The rest of the body that doesn't get oxygenated blood to the patient, then the patient dies, right?
That statement, I just don't even understand that statement, honestly. I don't know what that means or any of it.
Coronary artery supplies oxygenated blood to the heart itself, right?
Yes.
Without oxygenated blood, the heart will not beat and circulate blood to the rest of the body, right?
No, when you have a heart attack, the heart doesn't stop necessarily, unless you had the whole heart fibrillated and all your there's millions of coronary arteries to your heart. It had every one of them would have to stop in order for that to happen. So we'd have to fibrillate, a certain part of it for that to happen. So that statement is just way oversimplified. So I can't agree to that statement because of the oversimplification of it.
Is it because the heart still beats?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody who has a heart attack doesn't die. So people have heart attacks, they come to the hospital and most of them get saved. So it's just too much of an oversimplification.
Okay. If you cut off oxygenated blood to the heart, the heart cannot survive, right?
Yeah, but you don't take oxygen. You don't have non-oxygen blood go to the heart. That's just not I don't understand the scenario that you're saying. The only way to do that is you cut the heart out. I mean, I'm just saying that, yeah, obviously that's the only way to do that. That's the only time it doesn't have oxygen. When you have a heart attack, it's that area. But like I said, there's 3 major arteries and another 1,000,000 different arteries to the heart. So you have a heart attack to that local area. You don't just devoid the whole heart of oxygen. That's the function of the lungs. The lungs provide oxygen, blood, oxygenate the blood. So I just, that statement is just too gross of an overstate.
Oxygenate the blood. They don't supply oxygenated blood to the heart itself. Without oxygenated blood to the hearts will not survive. A person will not survive without oxygenated blood. And the only reason the rest of the muscles, the brain, the body gets oxygenated blood is from a functioning heart.
That's correct.
Is this
the
funny?
body does get blood to the rest of the body. Yes, that's the function of the heart.
You agree HIT can cause organ infarction and failure?
It can. That's the thrombosis portion of it, especially if it goes to the gut or to the legs, the extremities, the brain. Yes, it can.
DNC?
I'm sorry, what is that?
Disseminated intravascular coagulation.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify. I heard DNC, and so I didn't know what that was, but it's DIC. Is that what you said?
Yep.
You can get disseminated again because it's systemic. Goes all over the antibodies in the blood. The heart pumps the blood. It goes to our fingernails, all the way down to our toes, to the top of our hair. It goes all over, and you can get, in very severe situations, a DIC. That is a end stage result of lack of some catastrophic event.
Major bleeding.
DIC is less common in major bleeding. You just bleed to death. So DIC is when you clot up stuff throughout the entire body. You clot off the gut, you clot off your toes, you clot off your fingers. And so the DIC is different than that. That's more of a hemorrhage, what you're talking about.
That's why I ask about major bleeding. You can also get major bleeding, right?
With what?
Heparin-induced thrombocytopenia.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about DIC. So it's very confusing and what I wasn't following you because you said DIC and I didn't know you were talking about bleeding with HIT.
I can do a better job of my questions.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I just want to make sure I'm answering.
It can cause, as we discussed, organ infarction and failure, right?
Asked and answered. You can answer it again.
The DIC or the HIT?
HIT.
Yeah, HIT can cause thrombosis of multiple sites throughout the body. Yes.
Also cause major bleeding.
It can have this combination and paradoxical bleeding / thrombosis component. You can, which was not the case in this specific case with Mr. Saunier.
And death, right?
Mr. Saunier died. Yes, you're right.
You agree that the management of HIT requires the immediate discontinuation of all forms of heparin?
Yes, if it falls within the parameters of HIT of a greater than 50% count from the baseline cardiac surgery labs, and also specifically if the platelet count is under 100,000. Yes, I do.
And by the lab, you would include a HIT panel with a score of 3.501, right?
Object to the form.
You're saying that if you had that lab value, would you stop it, or would you stop it before? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what I wasn't following you on that.
Would you read the question back, please, Madam Court Reporter?
So the lab view would include a HIT panel with a score of 3.501, correct?
Yeah,
Same objection.
I still don't understand the question.
If you had a patient with a HIT panel of 3.501, would you discontinue the heparin?
I would if I had that in a clinical scenario. If I saw the OD, I would. And the WellStar group stopped it before they had the result, which that's why I said I thought that we're being super vigilant in this component, even though the patient has zero clinical manifestations of it. And I applaud them for that, honestly. And so I would if I saw that value, and then I would order an SRA and I would get an argatroban. Unfortunately, this patient couldn't do that, but that's the pathway that I would take.
And you also applaud them for not starting a non-heparin anticoagulant, right?
That's correct, because there's no indication actually draw the HIT assay. So why would you start argatroban or any other drug if quite honestly they didn't have the indication to even draw it?
Your 4T's score would be 0, right?
No, I think that it depends on for if I go through this other cause for thrombocytopenia 0, thrombosis 0. I think the timing you could say 1, and I think the thrombocytopenia, if I'm being liberal and I'm giving, if I gave a liberal answer, I would say it'd be a 2, a 1 for timing, 1 for thrombocytopenia. If I was using and being more conservative, then I would say it'd be a 1, a 0 for thrombocytopenia and 1 for timing, depending on the 136, which has clear indication to do. But if I wanted to be liberal and use 185 because it was a day after a heparin dose with a cath, if I use the 185, it'd be a 2. If I use the 136, it'd be a 1.
James, are you getting near the end?
I'm just going through my notes.
I do need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I need to take a quick restroom break. While you're going through your notes, I'm gonna have to take a quick restroom break.
We're just gonna go off camera here for a second, okay? And go.
We're going to go off the record at 7:49 p.m.
Yes, please.
Back on the record at 7:52 p.m.
Do you have any opinions that you haven't already shared with me today?
Oh, look, I think that I've been fortunate over 20 years to a lot of heart surgery.
Can't see you. You went blurry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm turning the video back on.
There
Can
you
you see
go.
me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Our video was off on the laptop. It was on the big screen. So maybe I'll start over again. I think that I've been fortunate to now do over 7,000 or 8,000 heart surgeries and been at 3 major institutions and been past president of multiple societies. And so I have seen a lot of national, international ways of treating cardiac surgery complications, unfortunately. And death of any patient is really, really heavy. And it's just a disaster for everybody, family and the team taking care of them, because there's a lot of effort in that. There are cases in cardiac surgery that are unexplainable. There are cases that unfortunately we deal with morbidity and mortality almost just like neurosurgeons more than in those 2 specialties more than anybody. In this case of an unfortunate mortality, I think that for this patient, I think that we have a scenario here where the team took care of the patient. The patient actually looks great, has no clinical symptoms of thrombosis or any major issues, has an isolated graft closure, which I've seen now enough times to know that it happens. And I even tell my patients that this is a possibility of having a heart attack after surgery. And that is part of the consent process across the board. I do not think that the WellStar team was under the standard of care. I do not think that with the platelet counts that I have seen, which is the only component that would have someone think about HIT, did not fall below the reduction to 50%. I do not think actually that a HIT test was ordered or needed to be ordered. And I don't think that there was a systemic problem with this patient that led to the mortality from HITT. I think it was a graft closure that led to the unfortunate demise of this patient. So that is my testimony as reviewing the records, retrieving the report of the autopsy, and reviewing the case that I know of it.
I don't have any more questions.
No questions.
Any questions?
Be safe.
Thank you for your time, doctor.
Guys, yeah, everybody be safe tomorrow, especially.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Whitford at 7:56, but if I could ask everyone before they depart, if they would like to purchase copy, please.
I would like a copy. I would like an
Body,
E-tran
yes.
with a copy of all of these.
E-tran.
Can one at a time, please? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Heather McGrady, E-tran with exhibits.
Okay,
Paul Reynolds, E-tran with exhibits.
okay. And Mr. Welborn? Would you like to purchase copy?
Mr. Welborn is going to get, he's a client of Ms.
Okay, I'm
McGrady, so
sorry.
he's
I thought
good.
he was another attorney. I apologize.
No, no,
Mr.
no.
Mr.
Okay.
Melbourne is not an attorney, yeah.
And Mr. Potts left already?
He's gone.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. It's nice to
Thanks,
meet you.
everybody.
Already
Bye. He's gone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, how bizarre is that? Guess he didn't like the outcome. All right, y'all have a great night.
Everyone have a good night. Bye-bye. Nice to meet you.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Leon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
All right.